done here. I'd like to call to order the September 18th meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. And Mrs. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Council agency members Steve Glickman.
Here.
Barbara Spector. Here. Joe Przenski.
Here.
Mike Wasserman.
Here.
And Mayor and Chair Diane McNutt.
Here. We're doing this a little bit differently tonight, starting down here at the ceremonial podium because we have several special presentations this evening. But we're going to start by asking two of our future leaders to come forward. This is an opportunity that we have at every council meeting for young people in our community who have already shown that they have leadership abilities to come to the council meeting and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would like to ask Deanna Scarlato Burns and Mariah Heminger to please come forward. They're both from Los Gatos High School. And if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and they're going to stay up here for a moment because we have our first special presentation this evening is a proclamation. And I would like to ask Kristen Kana of the Los Gatos chapter of Daughters of the American Revolution to come forward. And I am about to read a proclamation because this is Constitution Week in America. So let me read it to you, please. Whereas September 17th, 2006 marks the 219th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Diane McNutt, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd, 2006, as Constitution Week within our town, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution that they had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. Applause for DAR, please. Think she got it? Think she got it? Okay. Okay. And would you like to say anything? The Los Gatos chapter of DAR has been very helpful in our annual 4th of July celebration since we started it. Joe, when did you start that? In 2000? And they do the lemonade and some other fun activities out there. Anything you want to say?
Just on behalf of Los Gatos DAR, I'd like to thank the mayor for recognizing Constitution Week. We hope you all fly your flags in recognition of this week.
And stay here. And just as a reminder, I thought it would be nice if we read the Constitution, but that was a tad too long. And so our future leaders are going to read to us the preamble of the Constitution so that we remember its basic principles and what it's about. Ladies?
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperities, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Applause for the ladies. Thank you so much. Okay, Council, if it's all right with you, what I'd like to do is move the closed session report to after the rest of the presentation so that we can finish up here. Hearing no objections, that's what we're going to do. Our next presentation is a commendation to Tim Boyd, who is leaving our Transportation and Parking Commission. So if Tim and companion could come forward. And if she would rather explore the council chambers, that's okay too. And companion's name is?
Caroline.
Caroline. Glad to have you, Caroline. Okay, she's fine. So let me read you your commendation. Whereas Timothy Boyd has served the town of Los Gatos as a member of the town's Transportation and Parking Commission from approximately February 2, 2004 to August 9, 2006, and whereas during this period he has unselfishly contributed his time, energies, and capabilities to both the Transportation and Parking Commission and the community, and whereas the Town Council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition, now therefore the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, commendation, and thanks to Timothy Boyd for approximately 2.5 years of dedicated public service to the Town of Los Gatos and its citizens as a member of the town's Transportation and Parking Commission. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. I am it's with deep regret that I'm not able to live up to my full term on the commission, that family obligations prevent me from doing so, but I just want to say that I've gained a further respect for all our town employees, and at the same time, all the council members who have an immeasurable amount of hours that they have to devote to your activities. And I, for one, can say that my family appreciates it all. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no hands to shake your hands. Okay, our next presentation is from Rebecca Elliott, who is here somewhere, who is coming to us from the League of Cities, the Peninsula Division, and she has a special presentation to the town.
Good evening, Mayor McNutt, members of the Town Council, city staff, town staff, and residents of Los Gatos. It's a pleasure for me to return tonight to the Town of Los Gatos, representing the League of California Cities, to present the town with the League's Helen Putnam Award of Excellence in the category of Enhancing Public Trust, Ethics, and Community Involvement. I'd like to share just a brief history with you about the Helen Putnam Award. Helen Putnam was a mother, a school teacher, a principal, a mayor, and a county supervisor. But most of all, she was a person who viewed meeting one's potential as the measure of success. Excellence to Helen Putnam was someone who did his or her very best. She was as supportive and loving of people who did their best as she was of people who did the best. To the League of California Cities, Helen Putnam defined excellence. The Award for Excellence, which was initiated in 1982 to recognize outstanding achievements by California's 477 cities, is given in her memory. Helen Putnam award-winning cities have made unique contributions to community residents and businesses, contributions which may have resulted in lower costs or effective delivery of service. This year, the League received 150 applications and awarded 28 awards to cities during our annual conference 2 weeks ago. The Award of Excellence recognizes and promotes the outstanding efforts and innovative solutions by city governments to improve the quality of life in local communities, to implement efficiencies in service deliveries and operations, and to provide services responsive to the local community. It's obvious to me, as it was to the members of the Helen Putnam Award Committee, that community unity far surpasses these goals and objectives. The challenge of gathering all of the town's service-minded organizations and individuals to brainstorm and prioritize your community's needs and then to tackle them together was most ably met by the council staff and citizens of Los Gatos. In one short year, Community Unity not only identified 88 community projects, but divided them into working categories, formed teams to focus on the top 8 projects, and completed 6 of these projects within the first 6 months, and 50 projects in less than 2 years. This is a totally incredible and highly commendable accomplishment for which you should all be proud. Working together, you more than met the initial challenge of imagining what could be done if you had 50 volunteers or 100 or more. Indeed, the town of Los Gatos has created a magnificent model of community unity for cities across the state. On behalf of the League of California Cities, I congratulate the residents of the town of Los Gatos and offer a most heartfelt thank you to the town council and to the staff for the excellent work you have done and will continue to do to enhance the quality of life for all your residents. Mayor McNutt, it's my turn.
Don't stop applauding yet. Council, stand and take some applause. Please. And we also want to give special recognition to staff, to Town Manager Deborah Fagoni, to Regina Faulkner from Community Services, for Susan Buxton for all of her volunteer efforts. And Mr. Wasserman, as founder of Community Unity, would you like to say something about tomorrow evening?
I'd be delighted. Thank you, Mayor. Tomorrow there's going to be a public reception, I think is the appropriate term, at the Neighborhood Center here on Main Street at 7 o'clock. And it's simply going to be a celebration, and all those involved, all those in the community, but all those involved in Community Unity over the last year and a half or so have been invited. And it's cake and cookies, and just to celebrate the good works and accomplishments and kind of pat each other on the back and take a look at what we've done and where we're going from here. I think it's going to be it's just a celebration for what we've accomplished. And what we've accomplished in the state of California, I think, is a wonderful thing, and I thank the League for that. And I know down at the convention, a number of cities came up and wanted to know more about Los Gatos' Community Unity program and took information, and hopefully that will grow in their communities as well. So thank you all for being a part of this, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you. Our next presentation is going to be by Suzanne Boxer-Gassman, Superintendent of Los Gatos Union School District. So while she is coming up to that podium, I'm going back to my regular seat, okay?
We're sending around some handouts that may help out as we go.
Would you like to introduce your special guests in the audience?
I would very much like to introduce 2 of our board members, Phil Couchet, who is the president of the Los Gatos Union School District Board, and Tina Orsi-Hardigan.
Thank you for being here.
And I'd like to say thank you to you, Mayor, and to the council members for inviting me and staff. It's really exciting for me to be here. I've never had this pleasure before. And I'm really here to talk about one particular initiative that is part of our E-Squared Excellence in Education project. And just to do a little test here beforehand, how many of you have heard of E-Squared Excellence in Education? Very good. How many of you have heard of Project Cornerstone? Great. Okay, then this should be simple. Just to give the context, I'm really here to talk about our community-wide character development program. But to set the context for it, I'd like to talk a little bit about our Quest for Excellence, our E-Squared program, which was initiated through task forces that engaged parents, staff, and administrators in identifying some key strategies that would help us move our district, which is very good, to make it even better. And from that came this vision. We want our kids to be smart and well-educated and empowered learners. We want them to be well-versed in the arts, digitally literate in computer skills and online library research, globally and socially aware, and what I want to talk about today, a strongly principled citizen of our community. The initiatives that we have that are supporting that vision include academic excellence, global awareness, informational and digital literacy, visual and performing arts, and our community-wide character education program, which is what I'm really going to focus on tonight. Overlying all of that is really a commitment to continuous improvement and to continuous measurable improvement, which in education is often a challenge that we're beginning to tackle. One of the recommendations of the task force was that we develop a comprehensive, integrated, community-wide character education program. Now, we were doing things related to character development. At Fisher had the social emotional learning program. We had a character traits program. But this was really a bigger idea. And it started with the parents and staff that were on that task force they started by thinking about anti-bullying program. But they realized as they did some research that you can't build character by trying to stamp something out. It's really about building. It's about development. And so when they looked at a model in Pleasanton that has been approaching this, that was one of the ideas that they put forth. So last year, to begin our work, we formed a community-wide task force. We included Mayor Diane McNutt. We have a representative from the police department, various parent organizations such as CASA. We have a representative from the High School Coalition, Steve Rauwolf from the Los Gatos Rec Department. We have Mike Wasserman from Community Unity. And because this isn't a sorority or fraternity, we're hoping to engage even more members of our task force. And the charge for this task force is to create a strategic plan to build a community of character. So as the group gathered, one of the ideas that was put forth was developmental assets, an approach to building character that was being sponsored by Project Cornerstone. It was based on research that had been going on for many years through the Search Institute, nationwide research, and essentially the developmental assets really identified relationships, opportunities, values, and skills that all young people need. And that the more they have, the better they thrive. What we realized in one of our early task force meetings is that all of us that were in that room were asset builders. In some way, we were connected to building the assets for our children, often on a different pathway. So we learned a little bit more about Project Cornerstone and the 41 assets that help children thrive. There are external assets that are promoted outside of the student, and there are internal assets that relate to what is happening within the student. Family support, the boundaries, constructive use of time. These are just an example. And I did pass out to you a single page that listed all of those 40 assets. Santa Clara County has been involved in this project for some time, and the county has added one more asset, and that has to do with positive identity. And given the diverse makeup of our community in this Santa Clara County, that made sense to them. Now, research shows that the more assets, the more positive, healthy choices students make. The fewer the assets, the more negative, high-risk behaviors students make. All of us, parents, teachers, community, and I would say our children, are all asset builders. And what we're about is engaging our community, our children, our staff in building assets with our children. After Linda Silvius, who is the project coordinator, came and talked to our group, the the task force, she also came and spoke with all of the administrators, and they were truly excited at this idea and said, let's go for it, because to become a partner, all we had to do was administer their survey. They're collecting data. And from that, we got an individual school report based on the results of that survey. We, last spring, gave the survey to, we offered the survey to all of the students in grades 4 through 8. In a minute, I'll tell you the participation. The idea was that we would use the results to create a school plan for increasing student assets, a district and community-wide plan that would engage all of the partners, so that you can imagine we have various constituencies from the community all engaging in building student assets. It was important to recognize that character education begins with adult role modeling behavior. That's an important piece because we want to engage parents in this process as well. And as I talk a little more, I'll tell you about the plans that we have for doing that. We invited all of the 4th through 6th grade students to take the survey because we required positive permission. There were actually 63% of the 7th and 8th graders and 53% of the 4th through 6th graders. And what did we find? Even though we're a unique community, even though we're a high-performing district, our results were very similar to county-wide results, which was what the coordinator had predicted. But we wanted to see our own data. In a nutshell, older children report fewer assets. They start out pretty good in 5th grade, 4th grade, but by the time we see them in 7th and 8th, the assets that they perceive them to have become less. This actually represents our results compared to Santa Clara County. It represents the average number of assets and shows how the declines with grade level. Now, there's 40 possible. They say that 31 to 40 is the ideal. That's what we're looking for. And in fact, we haven't quite made it in any of the grades, but you do see that in 5th and 6th and 7th grade, we're a little bit ahead of the county. But you can also see that there's a big dip between 6th and 7th grade. Now, our hope is that at some point we can get the high school to administer this same survey so that we could really look at our students and what happens through 12th grade. Some of the examples, just to give you a tidbit, a tinfoily tidbit of the data that came back, it showed that this was in the 7th and 8th grade results. And there was a little different survey for 7th and 8th grade versus 4th through 6th. Family support was very high amongst those students, as you can see. But it was interesting that positive family communication was a little bit significantly lower. Service to others, 55%. I think Fisher felt like maybe the work that they did last year with their service project perhaps was influential in that. Participation in youth programs, I think we can all feel good about that. 70% said that they saw that as an asset. Now, remember I said the more assets they have, the better, the more they thrive. The fewer the assets, the less they thrive. So let me see if I can explain this. This actually is some proof of that statement. 181 of the 378 students reported getting good grades. Now, of the students that reported that they only had 0 to 10 assets, only 14% of those kids said they had good grades. As you can see, those that had 31 to 40 assets, 76% of them reported themselves as having good grades. So this supports that notion that the higher the assets, the more responsible and healthier behavior. On the other hand, here's another example. 61% of the respondents report that they pay attention to healthy nutrition and exercise. And as you can see, those who have a greater percentage of the students with the higher assets reported that they have healthy nutrition and exercise. It works the other way too. It works if you, I know that I had limited time, so I didn't want to share too much. But I'm hoping that at some point perhaps the town council might want to sit down and delve a little bit more deeply into the results, looking at it from a town perspective. Because what we see is the exact opposite of what that slide was showing. If you look at how many kids had engaged in some high-risk behaviors, it's clear as a bell that those kids, there are fewer kids with high number of assets engaging in the high-risk behavior. So we're really excited about this project for a number of reasons. One, we have the possibility of really measuring success, measuring change. While we wouldn't want to give the survey in a year because it may take a while to really get some change, it is an opportunity to measure results. Each site will be looking at their data with staff, parents, and students. Linda Silvius, the project coordinator, will be meeting with a group of students at Fisher and also with a group of students at the elementary schools, teaching them about the assets, engaging them in creating a warm and welcoming environment in the school, because children can be asset builders too. Each site will develop a plan based on its data, identifying a focus area. Every staff member will identify objectives supporting that. And the district task force will also be developing a strategic plan, identifying strategies that each partner will want to take on, and looking at some of those assets maybe that they're most likely to influence. Let me give you just one example of what one school did. It sounds pretty simple. They found, this was a school in San Jose, high-performing school, great school, magnet school, but the kids didn't think it was a very friendly environment. And the staff was really shocked and pretty saddened too. So they met with students. They actually visited the classrooms, found out, well, what would make it a friendly environment? Why does it not feel friendly? And a lot of the kids said, well, the teachers don't seem to know our names. And if only they would smile. So the school took this on. That's a pretty simple, isn't it? They took that on, and the next year they had the middle school kids wearing name tags for the first 3 weeks of school. Now, you can imagine middle school kids do not usually relish the idea of wearing name tags. But because the kids were engaged in this process and knew what the teachers were trying to do, they actually went along with it. And they've been doing that ever since. And the great news is that when they regave that survey 3 or 4 years later, there was significant change in the school. Now, I'm not saying it was only because they knew the student's name, but that is an example of one positive action that a school might take to make a difference. So, what can a town do? I've done some checking around. I talked to some other superintendents. You know, there's about 14 districts in Santa Clara County already engaged. One of the superintendents from Campbell Union School District is working with the town about both passing a resolution, adopting the 41 assets, or supporting the 41 assets. We're going to be looking to join up with other groups. I know some private schools are interested in joining in. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you tonight, and I hope that it is the beginning of the conversation and not the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's turn the lights back on. Are there any questions? Mr. Glickman.
First of all, Superintendent, thank you for your usual superb presentation. We are extremely proud of you, and we're extremely proud of our school district. A thought occurs to me, as you said, what can the town do to help? We do happen to have a youth commission, and it is their charter to address youth issues in town. So if, with the concurrence of the other council members, perhaps that might be a place to start in terms of liaison.
I was thinking about that too, and so I can talk to you about how we might do that. That seems like a natural connection. Great.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you again for coming down. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you. Okay, we're going back to the regular agenda now, and we will do the closed session report. Mr. Korb?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. Council did meet in closed session tonight for a public employee performance evaluation of yours truly. Council did not complete the evaluation. It will continue another night, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. Next on the agenda are consent items. These are all of the routine items that will be passed with one motion unless there's any member of council who would like to pull a consent item. Mrs. Spector.
Yes, I'll be pulling number 10, agenda item 10.
Okay, and any pulled consent item will go into the other business category of the agenda. Is there anyone from the audience who wishes to pull an item other than number 10? Mr. Davis? Number 8. Anyone else? Council, a motion, please.
Madam Mayor?
Oh, yes,
If I
sir.
may, just before council acts on the consent calendar, on item number 5, there are just a couple of typographical changes to the resolution. I just want to point them out for the record and ask that council approve the corrected version of the resolution. In the title, on line 3, there's a statement, the last call bar is detrimental. That should be R. And in the following sentence, the following line, it says, and constitutes, the S should be deleted. And on page 6 of the resolution, on the first line, there's a reference to personal. That should be personnel. And those are the corrections to be made, and I again ask that council's action be addressed to the resolution as corrected.
Thank you. Motion, please.
Move to adopt the consent calendar with the exceptions of items 8 and 10.
Seconds.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. And again, we will pull up items 8 and 10 under other business. We now move to verbal communication. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on this evening's agenda. We have 2 cards. Mr. Davis, you're starting to rise. Do you want to go first?
Very good, yes.
You're on.
Yes, I'd like to offer some comments for your consideration. Number 1, I want to thank Mr. Slickman Glickman, for his question of myself, referencing his name. And unfortunately, Mr. Glickman, I have not been able to finish my answer to you. It was a partial answer, and I will take it up again at a subsequent meeting, okay? Number 2, update on Cryptosporidium. I spoke to it at the last meeting, and I see that the fountain has been turned off in Los Gatos. And I think that's so appropriate for it to shut it down until there's a good game plan in place based on the latest science on how to deal with Cryptosporidium, okay? Number 3, there's still no evidence that I can see that the engineering department is moving ahead with safety, public safety on Blossom Hill Road for the school kids and the general public. The sidewalks are still missing, no sense of any kind of urgency. It is so ugly, ugly. I mean, the League of California Cities talks about how wonderful Los Gatos is. I come up here with public safety, which has got to be number 1 for the school kids, and nothing's happening, okay? And according to this man, Kevin Rohini, he says it won't happen until spring. Spring is in June of next year. So you've got to tell this man to move, because he has empty when it comes to the kids. Empty. Lastly, and I've got a minute, the Planning Commission of the city has just recently voted to deny this macro monster mansion, 3M, macro monster mansion, up on Kennedy Road that was before them just last week. So I'm going to read you the description of this proposal. The development includes a new residence with attached garage, guest quarters, cabana, art studio, pool, tennis court, pavilion, entry gatehouse. The total floor area of the house is 11,775 square feet. The attached garage is 1,778 square feet. The overall floor area for the project, inclusive of the guest quarters and the accessory structures, is 16,401 square feet. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
With a 6,000 square foot
Thank you,
basement.
Mr. Davis. Please be seated.
Think about it, please.
Okay. The next person up is Michael Silva. And while Mr. Silva is coming to the microphone, could I ask staff to clarify the situation on the fountain?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'm going to ask John Curtis to do so because we have a very recent update from the Department of Environmental Health, and it's very good news.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. On Thursday, the County Department of Environmental Health came out and looked at our fountain system. This was really part of their inventorying all of the various interactive fountains here in Santa Clara County. They found our system to be state-of-the-art. We have an ozonator, which is not present in all of these different interactive fountains. They were very satisfied that we had decided as staff to turn off the water until further information is known, and they did give us some ideas about things that they would be thinking about to deal with this particular organism that has created problems. Right now, this seems to be we are in the right place at the right time and awaiting further information from the county.
And I'll just close by saying that we will continue to leave the fountain off for approximately 30 days because environmental health is following up on some other technology issues. And so we think it's prudent to join all the other cities in keeping their fountains off. But ours, as John said, is state-of-the-art, and they see no issues with it at this time.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Silva.
Good evening.
You have up to 3 minutes to speak on your subject.
Thank you. As you know, my name is Michael Silva. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, council members. This is an FYI, if you will. It's about teenage drinking in town. I had a birthday party for my daughter who turned 16 on the 9th of September. And there was about 60 kids there at one time and maybe 75 all told. Early on as they were coming, I approached 3 of the kids, 3 girls and 2 boys, because I have heard, I've never had a party for the high school kids before, but I've heard numerous stories, having been in business here in town for the last over 30 years and lived here as well. So I had a little bit of concern, but it's my belief that the kids don't really, the high school kids in particular, it's interesting because we just had the report from the superintendent about what's going on in the high school. They don't really have a place to call their own. Not really. Place for teens isn't really something that they consider their own. It's at the school. They still have these controls. And after looking a little bit at what happened at this party, maybe that's true, but at the same time they're going to rebel about it because they are teenagers. Anyway, these kids said they did not want to have any alcohol whatsoever at this party, and they would act as bouncers to, if anybody should bring it along, to tell them to get out. Well, peer pressure won out. As I had one incident in the evening, as I was kind of not trying to be in their face about anything, but walking around. I've got a huge backyard. I live at 675 North Santa Cruz Avenue. If you know the Ivy House, that's where I live. And the backyard is rather immense. And as much as I had it all lit up and chairs and everything like that, out in the orchard part, it's kind of dark. I was out watching this from around the cliffs, not, like I said, not wanting to be in their face, and I saw this one boy run out of my house with a bottle of alcohol that I had in the refrigerator, running up the hill. Look what I've got, look what I've got. And he goes up the hill. Well, I immediately followed, busted the kid, said, get the heck out of here, took the booze away, and walked him out. Now, little do they know how lucky they were at that point in time, because I did have speed dial on my phone in case there was an incident. In fact, I even called the police department days before and said, I'm having a party for high school kids, because this is a service that our town provides to help make sure that certain problems don't happen. The police department said, yeah, fine, fine. However, I never saw a policeman. Nobody ever came by. And maybe it's just for the sake of letting the neighbors know that there's a party going on if there's too much noise. But my suggestion in that would be to at least have them come through one time and make a presence. If for no other reason, just walk in. Hi, how are you? Well, it's a big issue. Just quickly, and I'm sorry for going over.
Mr. Silva, let me do this because we are very strict about the 3 minutes, but we are able to ask you questions. So if you had one more thing that you wanted to say to us, what would it be?
One more thing is to let you know how much alcohol I actually found. I found the empty containers laying all over the places in dark places. I found an empty 5th bottle of green apple vodka. I found an empty 5th bottle of Bacardi rum. I found a large empty bottle of Jägermeister, and I found 2 cases of beer cans laying around in the back area. Where do they get this? How do they get this? That's the question. I've interviewed some of the kids, and they've given me some input, and I've also randomly talked to some high school kids since then, and I've got some information about that.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Mrs. Fagoni, I'm guessing that perhaps someone from PD might want to follow up with him. And
Yes, we will take the card and make sure that police follows up so that you understand how the program works. But we
and
do
also that
appreciate
they
your
have
feedback.
his input.
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Good.
That'd be great.
Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. And one part I wanted to add on, and thank you, Mr. Silva, for coming forward and bringing that information on the safe party guidelines. You're calling in, reporting you were having a party. Also, it allows the police to know what's going on. And then if they receive complaints from neighbors, they have a contact because you called ahead of time saying, this is my name, this is my phone number. And instead of just coming down onto the party and who knows what happens, they then can call you up and say, hey, we've received a complaint. Can you handle this internally on your own? And I really appreciate your being proactive, if you will, and participating in that program. I'm glad to hear nothing happened. And I am concerned as well with you there monitoring what you found the next morning. How did all that alcohol get there to your backyard and you were there? So it's a real problem that you brought up, and I appreciate your doing so.
One of the things that, in answer to that, there was a party that happened in Saratoga just a few weeks ago. Maybe some of you heard of it, so maybe some of you didn't. I talked to kids, I talked to other parents, had no idea about this, but there was 200 kids that showed up at this party, and 2 of them went to the hospital stabbed. The alcohol problem is rampant in the high school, and it may be because they don't have an asset of something that they can call their own.
Thank you, Mr. Silva.
Thank you.
Wait just a moment. Mr. Glickman?
Yeah, I appreciate that Mr. Wasserman pointed out our party guidelines program is adopted by the police. We're very proud of that, and we want to get the word out that people should do exactly what you described that you did. Let our police department know about the party, and then they have somebody to contact if there's a problem. And I think the more people who avail themselves of that, and the more party givers who avail themselves, the less problem, or we're not going to make the problem go away. It'll be less of a problem. There is one other program I wanted to mention, again, for everybody's knowledge, including the attendees at your party that there is also a program in town called Safe Rides. And every high school student has that phone number on their ID card. And between 10 and 2 on every Friday and Saturday night, if they need a ride home, because for whatever reason they need a ride home, they get one, confidential, from wherever they are to home. And we hope that young people, if they haven't made a particularly good choice of a particular evening, will avail themselves of that program rather than trying to drive home.
The other thing that the kids told me, I asked them, where do they get this alcohol? Because it was apparent that it wasn't the kind of thing that they would take from their parents' house. Full bottles. And what I got out of a bunch of them, and this were even some youth that graduated from the high school that have gone through this before, because I've got 3 kids now, one that's a junior at the high school that have gone through high school here. One went to Bellarmine and 2 are going through Los Gatos. The one thing is a thing called shoulder tapping, which I'd never heard of before. They just stand outside these liquor stores or wherever and just tap people on the shoulder until somebody buys it for them. And the other one was that they even go as far as looking for homeless people or whatnot that hang behind bars and whatnot. And there's one in town that happens to be talked about lately that they told me they'll just go back there. If it costs them a couple extra bucks to get somebody to go into the liquor store and buy them some alcohol, they just do it. So, and then back to the police department, you might consider, at least letting the presence be known, if for no other reason, to help deter it and give those kids that feel the peer pressure, that can't seem to get the rest of the bad eggs, which is a smaller element evidently, out of there, might be a benefit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. We have one other card, and that is Anita Anderson.
Hi, thank you for giving me my 3 minutes. I am here representing employees of the La Canada building. I am very fortunate to live and work in Los Gatos, and I work in a very historical building. My coworkers, which are here with me this evening, okay, we have a severe parking problem at that building. And last week, I emailed the town of Los Gatos. My email was forwarded to a Detective Langer, who was very, very prompt, by the way, and called me. And he said, I'm sorry, but it's public parking, and the only solution I can give you is that you and your coworkers can park back behind the post office. That's all-day parking. The issue is the parking behind our building at this Victory Lane parking lot, it's 3-hour parking. And you have a very good, we call him the ferry meter guy, and he's very good, he's very prompt. He comes around and he chalks the tires. And it's just becoming an escalating problem for the businesses and for the employees. We have had our neighbors, the Avery Company, have had members of the town council, I believe, at their office having meetings saying to the secretaries, could you please go down and check my car before I get a ticket? And it's just disruptive for business. And my coworkers receive citations on a regular basis. One was cited twice in one day. We cannot get up from our desks every 3 hours, bam, 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 and it's disruptive to business. And we're only allowed to leave our office, at break times and our lunch hours. We have a solution. We didn't want to just come here to complain. We have a solution, which is if the town of Los Gatos can offer parking permits that we would be willing to buy so that the meter guy could just pass. Say, oh, he sees the sticker. These are employees of this building. And we, bring revenue. We spend money. We're having lunch. We have dinners. We shop. And we just thought it would be fair if there could be some sort of a solution to this problem. And like I said, we'd be willing to pay for a parking permit yearly, monthly, bi-yearly, which would bring revenue to the town of Los Gatos. And it has become a hardship on my coworkers when, like weekly, they're getting tickets. And I was just wondering if the town council could maybe debate that and see what kind of solution they can come up with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wait just a moment. Mrs. Spector?
Yes.
Thank you. I was curious, when the officer suggested the parking lot behind the post office, what was your and your friend's reaction to that?
We understand that that option is there. We feel that it is an inconvenience since we work in the La Canada building. We just kind of think that's, we have people parking, like for example, on Wednesdays is the worst, okay? The opposite where the Main Street Burgers are, that lot over there, they have some sort of meeting every Wednesday. They shoo everybody out of that parking lot over into ours, okay, and so they can have valet parking. That is the worst day of the week. That is the day that my coworker was cited twice in one day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening under verbal communication? Okay. Then we'll move along on the agenda, and we will move to public hearings. Item number 11, consider a request to change a zone from RM 512 to RM 512 PD for a 7-lot residential subdivision and approve to demolish a single-family residence and a 3-unit apartment building built prior to 1941. The property location is 17005 and 17017 Roberts Road, and we will begin with a staff report by, it says Pamela Jacobs, but I'm thinking it's Bud Lortz.
Yes, it is Bud Lortz. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. The applicant is, as the mayor mentioned, requesting approval of 2 applications. One is a PD, which would change the zoning from RM 5 to 12 to RM 5 to 12 PD, which would allow for the construction of 7 units. And then also architecture and site approval to demolish the existing single-family residence and 3-unit apartment building. The proposed detached units will consist of 7 two-story market rate units ranging in size from 1,808 square feet to 1,986 square feet of above-grade floor area. Each of the units will also include a cellar. The lots range in size from 3,882 square feet to 7,358 square feet. The 2-story houses will be about 26 to 28 feet tall. Just for comparison purposes, the adjacent townhouse project is similar in height, but was approved for 30 feet. The proposed units have 9-foot plate heights, which is what causes the homes to be about 26 feet to 28 feet high. The side yard setbacks are 7 feet. For comparison purposes, Villa Felice and Vasona Ranch have setbacks of 3 to 4 feet, and then in some cases go as much as 10 feet. It'd probably be easier to compare this project to the Almond Grove neighborhood. The Almond Grove area has homes with 5-foot setbacks, side yard setbacks, and 15-foot front yard setbacks on lots that range anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 square feet, but 5,000 is the minimum lot size. The lot sizes recently approved for projects of a similar design is about 3,500 to 4,000 square feet. The Planning Commission considered this proposal on 3 occasions, May 10th, July 12th, and August 23rd of this year, and recommended denial of the plan development to the Town Council. A traffic study was prepared for this project by the town's consulting traffic engineer. It raised 2 issues. One is that there needs to be a installation of a right turn lane on Roberts Road northbound approach to Blossom Hill so that a shared left turn through lane and exclusive right lane are provided. It also required a new continuous sidewalk on the east side of Roberts Road adjacent to the project frontage. The primary access to the site is from Roberts Road. There is an emergency access driveway that will serve off of Blossom Hill Road. Also, signs will be installed prohibiting left turns to and from the entrance to this project during Fisher Middle School's peak periods. As we know, it can be pretty congested out there. A total of 35 parking spaces will be provided on site. 14 of these spaces are located in garages, 14 are in driveway aprons, and 7 visitor parking spaces are provided. There are existing multifamily residences abutting the eastern project boundary. The proposed density of the development is 7.1 units per acre. Somewhat on the low end of the density range of 5 to 12 dwelling units per acre. The density of the development is compatible with the surrounding multifamily and single-family developments, which range anywhere from about 10 units per acre to a little over 5 units per acre. One of the outstanding issues has to do with an adjacent multifamily development of attached townhouses, in that 3 of the property owners currently utilize the subject site to gain access to their rear yards. There's no easement or formal agreement for the use of the applicant's property for this purpose. Although it is a civil matter, we did try to explore a number of different options, but no agreement was reached on a solution. The proposed project offers 3 community benefits, including a $15,000 contribution to the sidewalk project on Blossom Hill, contribution of about $5,000 for sidewalk improvements right near the site, and then also a new street light at the southeast leg of Blossom Hill Road at Roberts Road. Staff concludes that the project is consistent with the general plan and zoning code. The Commission reviewed the requested proposal and determined that density and intensity were not appropriate, even though the proposed project is on the lower end of the allowable density range. The intensity is also similar to or less than other PD projects that have been approved. The proposed project is not requesting exceptions to the zoning requirements that are inconsistent with other PD projects that have been approved by the town. Additionally, the proposed project is not unusually dense or intense when compared to other similar projects. One of the things that caused some challenge on the part of the Commission is that they, just as they've been challenged on similar projects in the past regarding the small lot detached single-family projects, and given that there seems to be some concern or interest in these types of projects in terms of how they're designed, we're suggesting that design standards be developed in the near future to assist not only property owners but also the Commission and Council in designing and reviewing these types of projects. That concludes staff's report.
Thank you. Council, what I thought we should do is focus initially on this specific application, and then we could circle back with staff's request on council direction about developing the guidelines for small lot single family. Does that work, rather than trying to blend it all in together? So we have questions of staff. Mrs. Spector.
Thank you. A couple of questions. I have asked Mr. Lord several questions, which I figure I'll ask him in front of everybody now. First of all, with regard to the 9-foot plate heights, when you use that terminology, you are talking about what?
The height from the floor joist to the ceiling. So the lowest you can usually go is 8 feet. 9 feet is very common. Sometimes we see 10 or 11 feet. And
so you have 9-foot ceilings on the lower floor, 9-foot ceilings on the second floor, correct? And then what kind of height in the attic?
It's less than 7'6". It's probably about, well, let's see, we're 9 and 9. It's 18. It's probably about 6 or 7 feet.
And then one other question. You said that the setbacks and so forth are not inconsistent with the other projects, but they are inconsistent with the RM zone as we have in our ordinance.
They are inconsistent, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Glickman?
Thank you. In reading the Planning Commission transcripts, the neighbors frequently brought up the issue of, the neighbors who live in the condos who have gates that are right on the lot line that give them access to the existing property, have expressed a concern that they'll have trouble having two egresses from their homes. I think some of them raise the issue of emergencies. We're very conscious of safety, but I wanted to ask you to give us a sort of professional overview of reasonable expectations for people who are in that situation. Do they have, based on experience and good planning practice, a reasonable expectation of having that access, or anything you could tell us that would enlighten us on that issue would be helpful?
On attached unit projects, whether they be medium density or high density, if there's any more than two in a group, and there usually is, there's anywhere from 5 or 6 in a group, the interior units will not have access out of their backyards other than through their unit. So it's very common for people to have to transport materials and things through their unit to their backyard. And this is very common, and it exists all over town.
Thank you very much.
Other questions of staff? Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I see this project's been before Planning Commission 3 times, and the vote I found in my time on council doesn't always reflect necessarily what was being thought. And sometimes it's okay, we've got to a certain point, and Planning Commission is unable to help more at this point. Let's move on to the next step, and et cetera, et cetera. Very concisely, what would you say is the main reason for Planning Commission's denial?
I believe that they are struggling with the issue of single-family, detached, multifamily projects. And that's why I'm thinking design standards would be helpful, because the council has been receptive to these kinds of projects for exactly the reason that Mr. Glickman was raising, is that attached projects don't have access to their rear yards on the interior units. This is a project that is not unique to Los Gatos, and it certainly has been built over the last 15 years in town, and we have about 10 of these projects, and they've been received extremely well by the neighbors, and they've been received extremely well by the community in terms of purchase. By the way, I do want to mention that the project that is before you is, although there's 3 alternatives, is alternative C.
Thank you. And if I may, just so I understand what you said.
Yes.
This project, alternative C, does not have those shortcomings and concerns as far as access and backyard.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Lawrence, would you talk about the community benefit aspect that is offered to us at the table at this time? Because that has evolved over time as well. Would you be more specific about the staff's position in relationship to what is currently on the table, and as it relates to our standards about the expectation of community benefit?
Well, this particular project does provide a number of community benefits. As we know, that any project that generates more than 5 peak hour trips triggers a requirement that the applicant demonstrate the benefit of the project outweigh the impact of the increased traffic. In this particular case, we look in the general neighborhood of this particular project and look for shortcomings in that area that this developer could contribute towards. In this case, as I mentioned, a $15,000 contribution to Blossom Hill Sidewalk Project, as well as $5,000 towards sidewalk improvements, which will assist in completing a gap in sidewalk in that general area. And then also we noticed that there's a need for a new electrolyre needed at Blossom Hill and Roberts Road for increased safety, and this developer would be contributing to that.
Now, is your estimation that the amounts or the intention for this particular community benefit is aligned with what we typically see in most developments?
Yes, it is, and that's what we tested against.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Who is speaking for the applicant this evening?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council. My name is Laura Worthington Forbes. I'm with RBF Consulting, and tonight I'm representing the applicant for the Bella Vissona project. We have a short PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. I believe you should have a packet with the copies of each of our slides before you. Just really quickly, I know everyone's touched on this already, but just a really quick overview. We are requesting a zone change tonight from the RM 512 zone to RM 512 PD for 7 dwelling units on an approximately 1.1 acre site at the junction of Blossom Hill and Roberts Road. And just a point of note, it is 2 parcels that we're looking at, and we would be merging those parcels into one single development for a net increase of 3 units. Just a bit about the project history. In its past life, there were a total of 9 townhomes that were proposed on the 2 separate parcels by 2 separate prior property owners. When Eden Homes completed purchase of the second lot, which is the southerly portion, in 2004, staff did encourage them to merge the 2 lots, resulting in a combined lot of greater than 30,000 square feet, thereby allowing us the opportunity to request a PD zone. So what's the reason for the PD zone? Well, it certainly allows us an alternative use and zoning that's unique to the site characteristics. It allows flexibility for both the town and for the property owner to create a better design than what could be achieved under the existing zoning. And it allows us an opportunity to comprehensively plan both parcels as a single development. After 2.5 years of working very collaboratively with the CDAC and planning staff, I'm going to fast forward to the first Planning Commission meeting. That took place on May 4th, and that's where our original design, which is shown as option C, was presented to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission comments that evening were really focused on 7 elements: flipping the configuration of the site plan to mirror that of Sarah Court, eliminating or reducing the sound wall, which is on Blossom Hill Road, right between these 2 units, reviewing the number of variances, reevaluating the community of benefit, which you discussed earlier this evening, having guest parking be maintained by an HOA, consider providing access for the rear yards of the neighboring condos, and since May, I just want to add that we've been working pretty carefully and consistently with the neighbors to resolve that issue, and consider reducing the density and the intensity of the site. With that in mind, we came back to the Planning Commission in July and felt like we had responded directly to all of the Planning Commission's comments with 2 new site plan options shown on your slides as option A and option B. We also provide a modified version of option C. And in addition to that, in written correspondence to the Planning Commission, we provided a comparative analysis to demonstrate that the density, the FAR, the setbacks, and the intensity of the units are not only comparable to the recently approved projects over the last 6 years, but also were very compatible with the neighboring property on Sarah Court, which I believe was approved 10 years ago. Additional Planning Commission comments that we received that evening include a preference for the previous location of the private road entrance, developing a community-friendly site plan with access to units from the private road, maintaining a similar setback with adjacent Victoriana condo units, eliminating units that are arranged back-to-back, which are shown in option A and option B, consider reducing the density and the size of the units, and reconsider providing access to the rear yards of Victoriana. After this second Planning Commission meeting, we took a very careful look at the Commission's comments. We sat down with staff again to understand and to clarify those comments and what the intent and the direction of those comments were. And as a result of that, we came back to Planning Commission on August 23rd, asking the Commission to really reconsider option C. That reconsideration was based on the fact that we felt option C really addressed the majority of their comments. And before going through those comments, I'll add that if we could not have them reconsider option C, it was us that requested a denial so that we could get better direction and understanding of what was desired for the site. So real quickly, we did believe option C addressed those comments. It looked at the road entrance further set back from Blossom Hill Road. We did feel like we had created a community-friendly site plan with access to the units from the private road. We were maintaining similar setbacks with the adjacent condo units, and we did eliminate the multiple units that were arranged back to back. We did also provide in writing to them a comparative analysis with staff's help that really looked at the gross density and net density as reasonable with comparison to the 4 or so projects that were comparable. And what we found was that we had, for the most part, lower FARs, lower densities, and a similar type of community feel. Lastly, you'll see on this comparative study chart, after the third Planning Commission meeting, we went back and said, well, we really need to do our homework just a little bit more and really try to understand why we felt that the site was reasonable at 7.1 units per acre. And what I'd like to point out is, you'll see Sarah Court right here. Our size of our units on average are slightly smaller than Sarah Court. The range is 1808 from 1986 to, at Sarah Court, the units range from 1967 to 2,367 square feet. Our average coverage of the site is about the same. Our density is slightly higher, but that's because we have a more efficient use of the site, and that's a similar comment with the FAR as well. And then lastly, our lot sizes are slightly larger than Sarah Court. We're at 64 feet versus 63, and our total lot area is larger at 5266. It's a small difference compared to 5227. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Louis Liu, the project architect, to quickly run you through how the design responds to Planning Commission comments.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, and town staff. Louis Liu, the project architect. And I would like to highlight some of the aspects of our design in 3 dimensions, 3-dimensional drawings. This first slide, the first aerial view, shows the general site design and building layout. You'll notice that the setbacks and the density are similar to that of Sarah Court. As Laura mentioned, our average lot size is about the same. It's 5266. You can also see that the Sarah Court site is triangular shaped, so it's not as efficient as ours. The next slide demonstrates the orientation of the buildings with particular attention given to the units facing Blossom Hill Road. You can see that the entrance to the unit from the driveway is from the private road, but the appearance to Roberts Road and to Blossom Hill Road is that of a front porch, therefore providing eyes to the street. The location of the sound wall, which was an issue with Planning Commission, is set back approximately 25 feet from Blossom Hill Road. It appears as a 6-foot fence with a 2-foot berm and is located between units 1 and 2. Which is right in there. The side setback to Blossom Hill Road is 20 feet, with the exception of lot number 2, which is 18'6", and this is due to the curve of Blossom Hill Road. And you can see that it's this unit right there. Next slide. So the next slide then shows shows the neighborhood community feeling. The access road, again, you can see the driveways all come off of the private road. It also demonstrates the rear yard setbacks between our units and the Victoriana condominiums. There's approximately 40 feet of separation. The rear yards are approximately 20 feet, with the exception of one lot, which is lot number 5, which you can see right there. This is due to an offset in the property line and also due to a large oak tree number 31, which we are saving, and that oak tree is this one right there. And then the last slide here, this illustrates the spacing between the units backing up to the Victoriana condos. The side setbacks between the units are approximately 14 feet, 7 feet each to the property line. As mentioned previously, the downtown code is 5 feet for single-family homes in an R1D zone. slide also shows the articulation of the massing and stepping back of the upper floor windows in the units facing the condominiums. And you can see that right in there. And lastly, I'd like to end with a 3D animation that illustrates the overall feel of our project. And Marilee, if you could get that going. This is a brief presentation. And as that's going on, I'd like to offer 10 top reasons why the project should be approved. The project will remove a degraded condition of an existing site and increase property values. May I continue?
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What would be the additional benefits?
Okay. Well, we have 10 reasons why we feel this project should be approved. It will remove the degraded condition of the existing site and increase property values. There are no significant environmental impacts. It will increase the town's housing stock. The site will add a right-hand turn lane, which will decrease traffic congestion at the Blossom Hill Road intersection. The project provides eyes to the street, which will create a safer environment for all pedestrians, specifically children attending the elementary school and middle school. The density is at the low end of the allowable development range. We're proposing 7 units in a 5 to 12 zone. All significantly sized and healthy trees are retained to give this site a mature look and feel. It provides community benefit contributions for sidewalk extensions that are really needed, and it does provide an additional street light. The project is well designed. The buildings are in scale and in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. The town's architectural consultant has reviewed the project and supports the design. And lastly, number 10, the project is consistent with the town's Los Gatos general plan and zoning codes.
Thank you. As soon as the 3D presentation is done, could you put the last slide up that shows the items that you just read off? Yes. And just leave it up there so that everyone in the audience can read it.
Okay.
Okay, questions? Mr. Glickman.
Okay. Just for to confirm my understanding, the access on Blossom Hill is emergency only, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so the normal standard access will be on Roberts Road?
Yes.
Okay, and could you again remind us of the mitigations that you've proposed, because Roberts Road is where Fisher Middle School is. Twice a day the traffic there is extremely heavy, so what are you doing to address the additional cars that you're going to be putting right on that road?
Well, we are adding a right-hand turn lane, so the Roberts Road will be widened. The sidewalk will be continued all the way around the intersection. And I think, as Bud had mentioned, there are going to be restrictions on left-hand turn lanes in and out of that complex.
Okay. And I know the mayor has asked us to have the top 10 reasons, but I would have asked when the slides are up if you could, with the light pointer, show us just where that sound wall is going to be.
Sure, I can do that.
I think they can flip back and forth as needed based on the questions.
Okay. Whoops. Yeah. Unfortunately, the lighting is not too good to see that, but it's right there between that unit and that unit there. And it appears as a fence in the drawing, and in reality, that's what it would be. It would be a 6-foot fence on a 2-foot berm. You might be able to see it better in the packet that you have in front of you.
Okay. I guess my question is for the folks driving down Blossom Hill Road, because we're very sensitive to maintaining aesthetic standards in our community, and big suburban projects with those ongoing sound walls are really not what we're looking for. So are you telling us that it's not going to look like a sound wall, it's going to look like a fence and a berm?
Yes. It's set back significantly, 25 feet from the street. And there are quite a few mature trees already that provide screening.
Great. Thank you very much.
Do you have a picture of what that fence would look like? Or no?
Yeah, I don't think we do right now.
Okay. Other questions of the applicant? Oh, Mrs. Spector.
Thank you. When you say fence, it's a solid structure, correct?
Yes, it's a solid structure. It would be made of probably precast concrete, but the precast concrete fences nowadays they've developed a lot since the precast fences that you see maybe along freeways. You can make them look practically like a wood fence.
All right. Have you, since you've been before the Planning Commission, have you changed your design so that the guest parking is in a common area?
Well, the guest parking is off of the main private road. It is dispersed within the complex, and it can be, I guess, put into the CC&Rs that be maintained by the association.
So are you saying it is going to be in the common area?
Yes.
Okay. Now, putting aside the common area for the guest parking, is there going to be a common area for the residents of this development to use?
No, there's not one plan right now.
How did you determine to have 7 units as opposed to some other number?
Well, we looked at the spacing of the units at Sarah Court. When we first went to CDAC, they said, well, look to Sarah Court because that's really the closest project that we have that's similar to this. We looked at the sizes of their rear yards, the size of the setbacks between those units. We also looked at the size of the units. We kind of felt that 1,800 to 1,900 square feet was a good size for the unit. The Victorian townhomes are 1,800 to 2,000. The homes on Sarah Court are a little bit larger. They're 2,300. So we were shooting for a home that was somewhere in between.
With regard to your units number 1 and 2, on those units, your quote-unquote backyards back onto one another, correct?
Yes, they do.
And with regard to the noise analysis, when you did that analysis, at what point in the homes did you measure it from? The first floor, the second floor, some other location?
That I'm not real clear on that. Perhaps staff could help you with that.
Right. And why did you choose to back up the numbers, units 1 and 2, the backyards into one another on the sort of the side?
Well, that was by intention and by design. The units there have essentially a road on either side of them, so that parcel of land right in here becomes an island. So if you put the front facing Blossom Hill, then you have a backyard facing the private road, which then kind of goes against the idea of community. So we've thought this was actually pretty clever in turning them sideways so that you would have units, this unit and that unit with front facades facing Blossom Hill, Roberts Road, and the private road.
That's all I have for him. At one point, I would like to know about the point of measurement for the noise.
Okay.
Thank
We'll
you.
come back to that then. No questions on this side? Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Would you discuss what transpired between the Planning Commission meeting of July 12 and the Planning Commission meeting of August 23? There were 14 different recommendations from the Planning Commission at the July 12 meeting, and the intent was that you would return with some accommodation of those. And in reading the Planning Commission minutes, I get the distinct impression that it's the Commission's assumption was that actually there was no change from the previous. And is that your position, or that is the interpretation I'm giving to the Planning Commission, or is that not correct?
Well, there was little change. I mean, I think from the second Planning Commission to the third one, when we came back to the third hearing, we looked closely at our designs, and we kind of felt that the first option really addressed all of their concerns. We couldn't see how we could design it any different and do any better, I think, in addressing their concerns. I think the density was really the main issue that they had a problem with.
All right. And could I ask you to address this question of the access to the rear yards? I know it's very complex. It continued to surface in the Planning Commission's meetings. What is your position in relationship to that?
Well, I guess I don't know that much about what the law and legal position is. We have tried to work with the neighbors. We've met with them on several occasions. We have a couple of proposals that are going back and forth, and I'm not sure that we'll arrive at one, tomorrow. But I think that we're still working with them on that.
I see. So in effect, there is some negotiation taking place at this time?
There is at this time, yes.
Okay. No other question.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, we will now take our other speakers, starting with Stephanie Schweihofer. Am I close?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Schweihofer, and I'm a resident of Victoriana HOA, which is a neighbor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and council members. I find this meeting really upsetting. We're in quite a difficult situation. It's obvious that we are delighted to have this piece of property developed because I think it is an improvement for us. It adds value to our homes. To call it out as it was called out earlier as a community improvement, and that's one reason we ought to accept it. I think, we ought to call it what it is. It's a money-making project, and it has been from the very beginning. And that's fine, but that's what it is. And the fact that it's being done in a way that's agreeable to the community and also to the neighbors is a side issue. To compare what's going up in that being proposed to go up on that piece of land to Sarah Court is incomparable when it comes to us as neighbors, because what's up against Sarah Court is a driveway and a schoolyard. So it's incomparable, and the things that we're dealing with this development are not. There are no neighbors dealing with this at Sarah Court. The bad faith of the presentation that you just saw to me is appalling. To draw illustrations, and that's why I screamed out, I'm sorry, I'm not used to these meetings, but to end with that little animation on the comparison of those houses next to our homes, and to have this new development where we know that density is a huge issue, that it shouldn't be 7 homes, it should be 6, for those drawings to be depicted with dark roofs, all nice under the trees and very small. And then the roofs on the property next door are all very bright and look like it's towering over, like we're towering over them, when in fact that what they're proposing to do is going to tower over us by a substantial number of feet, is just in complete bad faith and misleading all of you. And I just pray that you guys have actually taken the trouble to look at some of the information and the things that are being compared to other things that are not apples to apples. And I'm particularly irate right now because I work 70 hours a week. I don't want to be here. I'm supposed to be working. Instead, I'm in hours, endless hours with you guys and with them, and we're not getting anywhere. So for them to say that we're in negotiation is not exactly where, well, I don't know. I'll leave it to the others. And by the way, I'm not one of the people that's landlocked. It's my neighbors who are landlocked. It's just we've gone through these issues over and over and over again, and I even listened to your questions, and it's all double talk. I don't know if you plant your questions ahead of time so that you can get other people like the lawyer over here to answer them, but to me it's a joke. And I hope someone, because obviously we didn't come with a PowerPoint presentation, so I hope someone is giving you information.
Thank you. Wait just a moment. There's probably questions for you.
Oh, I bet.
Mrs. Spector.
First of all, what is the number of your unit? You said you're not one of them.
I'm number 1.
You're number 1, okay. Let me respond to your question. I read the Planning Commission transcripts, and in each of those presentations to the Planning Commission, you were extremely articulate, and I was very impressed by your knowledge of land use, whether it's...
I have no knowledge of land
Well,
use.
you had an innate knowledge of land use, and I was impressed by that. And I will represent to you on behalf of myself and my colleagues that we do not plant our questions, that I have visited the site, and my guess is that everybody else up here has also.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
And we do read all the reports.
Hope so.
Mr. Wasserman.
Hi. Thank you very much. Yes, we go through all of our papers and our visits, and we do all of our due diligence. It's an excellent council. Your comment about the presentation and the way the designs and drawings were shown with their dark roofs, your light roofs, you said that theirs would tower over yours. What is your number one most disagreeable issue with having these single-family homes butting up to your units?
If we had to pick one issue, we would pick access, and it's not mine personally. But the density is the issue. I mean, you know, everything has been centered around density. All of the issues that we have discussed, all of the drawings that they've submitted throughout these 3 or 4 or 5 months.
If I may follow up on what she just said.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You said if you had to pick one, let's just hit the first one you said, and that was access.
For my neighbors, that's what I would do.
And that's the access, as I've read the reports, Mr. Lortz, if you can, through the mayor, if you can participate wherever is appropriate. The access that you're referring to is in the area behind the proposed 3 homes.
Right.
Exiting out onto Roberts.
Right.
And your solution for that access is what?
They have it. We've talked about it with them, so they have a proposed solution.
Oh, okay. You're the speaker now. I was kind of wondering what your perspective was. I was listening to everything you said, and I was looking at the roads where it is and the access and whose property it's on.
Sure. What was discussed was creating an alleyway that would be large enough for people to get in with equipment and people to get out in case of an emergency.
Okay, and that was for the existing units.
For the three that are landlocked, yes.
Okay, and your request, your proposal is to have that easement, that access, be on the applicant's property.
That's right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
We're asking basically that he, more or less give us the land and make it accessible.
For you to maintain service and emergency access.
That's right.
For those homes.
Right, because it's not, to compare also to history, if we were going to build, if none of this land were developed and we were going to develop it today, our property and theirs, would we have units that don't have access? Oh, somebody said yes, that's totally normal apparently. Okay, great, but that's not the case. The case is that these units have existed for some 20-odd years. People bought these homes with access, and now suddenly they don't have access.
Okay. I just wanted to clearly understand you from what I read and what I heard today, that what you're looking for is access to your property via their property.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
But we've got other issues, as I said.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. No other questions. Next speaker is Ling Shan.
Good evening, Mayor, Associate Mayor, and other council members. My name is Ling Shan. I'm the resident of 16979 Roberts Road. I'm here to seek your support to allow us to be able to allow our accessibility to our backyard, which is we have been able to over 20 years. This proposed building plan, which is option C, will cause landlock for at least 3 families in our community, and our families, those families, including mine, will have no more access to our backyards, and this access problem by this landlord will not only cause inconvenience, as you could imagine. More importantly, raise safety concern. I have 2 kids and I have a disabled father. In case there's emergency like a fire or earthquake or any other expected disaster, we would have no back door to escape. Please help us to excuse me, help us to not have our life impacted by this proposal, which would only maximum the owners, the builders' profit, but shows careless to the neighbors. Thank you.
Pause just a moment in case there are questions. Thank you. Mr. Glickman?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you very much, and thank you for your heartfelt concerns. And we want to help, but we have to balance a lot of sometimes conflicting interests. As I look at the diagram, and I understand what you're saying, you're in one of those three middle houses, and this is kind of a, shall we say, a casually developed parcel for many years, and you're able to get out across it. Now, property owner is saying, well, they're going to build something and you won't have that access. Would it be feasible if you were to chat with your neighbors on the condo side to have, that I'm going to call this sideways access, so that in an emergency you could move along that property line to get things in and out from Roberts Road or from the other access? And I wish we had the diagram up because I'm talking about something that people can't see. But in other words, if in special situations you need to get something, including yourselves, in and out of your backyard, rather than going straight back and going through the new development, would it be feasible to have occasional access sideways across your neighbor's property where the condos are? I think we're about to get a diagram, so.
I would recommend slide number 11.
I was actually looking at 9, but 11 is, yes, 11 would be an excellent choice as well. So we could patiently wait a moment for that to appear. But do you understand my question?
Not quite, but you're saying that in term, when it's needed, I could use in my neighbor, like number 2's backyard, and then go through number 1's backyard and go out?
Exactly, on a very infrequent basis, if there were gates along that way, rather than having to have access into the new folks area, where again we're waiting for the diagram.
In terms of that, talking about, I'm number 3, so I would go through 2 backyards to be able to access. And I'm not sure the doors in their backyard, like even you open a door, right? Like each unit has a door to each other, but I'm not sure the door's always available or open.
I think the diagram's up there now, and if someone had that laser pointer, that would be.
And also I have a neighbor number 4 who, if, would go through 3 families, 3 backyards. Okay. I just don't feel that's really practical.
Oh, have you ever discussed that with your neighbors on the condo side where you live?
I think that's one of the options we thought about it, but then we don't think that's really practical. I mean, that's really can be accepted by all the neighbors, and it's not practical, basically. Because you talk about number 4, number 5, the owner's not always there, like this kind of empty house. So number 4, then they have to go through our backyard, and then number 2's backyard, and then number 1's backyard go out. I mean, there's a fire, right? I mean, there's no way that's what I feel.
Okay, I accept that. I had the thought that things like this can be negotiated with people if everybody's willing to try to work on the problem. But if you say you don't feel it's practical, I'll accept that.
Yeah, that was one of the options we were talking about.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Wait just a moment, see if there are any additional questions. And there aren't. Thank you.
Actually, sorry, just the last. We were actually supported option B, which is from 3 options. Option B would resolve this issue by having a driveway that next to the backyard.
Okay, thank you.
Just like we have right now.
Thank you. Sally Webb?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Town Council.
You have to move the microphone a little bit closer to you. Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I also live in the condo townhouses behind the proposed development. I'm in Unit 2. I would be landlocked. My big concern, I think if you've read all the papers, I don't want to repeat everything I've said in the past. I was here for the May meeting, the July meeting, and the August meeting. I do want to answer Councilmember Glickman's question. Thank you. We did ask our neighbors, would you be willing to have gates put in the side and let us come through? The overwhelming response was, well, no, not really, because we like to leave our houses open, and then there's security issues involved, and why change something that's already here when this other development has not been built yet? So there's more flexibility on land that's a completely blank slate right now than something that's already been built. I would like to say I had my 2 sons here earlier tonight. They're small, and safety is a huge concern for me as well. If there was a fire or an intruder or something, the thought of not being able to run away is very scary. I would like to say we have been working with Karam Iqbal and his staff. He obviously, as a developer, has an entire professional staff to help him get through this process, and we don't. Stephanie mentioned she's working all the time. I'm a single mom working all the time, came straight from work, and I don't have the preparation that they do, but I would like to say that all we want is access. One of the issues Stephanie mentioned with density, if there were only 6 homes rather than 7, maybe it could be arranged so there was some more open space. At Sarah Court, there's a nice circle, and all the little children, I have 4 friends that lived at one time at Sarah Court. The children drove their tricycles and bicycles around, and the moms would come out, and it was play. This design is basically a street. There's nowhere really to congregate, and so they keep talking about community and neighbors, but I don't really see how it is. It opens up onto Blossom Hill as just an emergency, but it is a road there. If there weren't so many, the density, if it wasn't so dense, excuse me, maybe they could spread it open a little and have more open space so we could get out. One thing I had said, I had a dangerous tree removed, and per the requirements of the town, I had to plant more trees, which I have done. I've planted 4 trees to try and provide a screen, but I need to be able to trim them.
Thank you. Pause just a moment and see if there are questions. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Webb, for being here tonight and all the other meetings you've attended as well. I'm listening to the issues being raised, and you mentioned you had 2 small children?
I do, yeah.
And I'm thinking about my house and my backyard and my neighbor, and we share a fence, and it goes backyard fence, back-to-back houses,
Right.
like in most places.
Right.
And in this proposal here, it would be backyard to backyard, backing up to each other with a fence separating.
Right.
And one of the ideas being tossed around or a concern seems to be having this access, for lack of a better word, maybe call it an alley,
Right.
pathway. And I'm thinking about, if I had 2 young kids in my back and I'm concerned about safety, would I rather have my neighbors behind me, his fence, who I know from talking over the fence, and their dog Butch, and et cetera, or would I rather have this alley that's open to the public where somebody can go through and look over in the backyard and see the 2 kids are there and mom stepped into the house? I'm just thinking about that. And for me, I'm hearing you raise these security issues. It seems it would be more secure for your children and family knowing that behind you is John and Mary Smith, and you have their phone number and they have your phone number, and if that, neighbors, as compared to open to the public, anybody walks by at night looking over a fence kind of thing. Would you address that?
Sure, I will. One of the thoughts we had about that is that if this wasn't the option that we first chose, but if there were to be a 3-foot alley, which is what we requested basically to get a lawnmower back there, or somebody, if we had to instead of having equipment that could grind out a stump, somebody to walk back there with picks and do it manually, we would want a gate at the end of that alley. So it just looked almost like an extension of the new development's backyard, and it's not obvious that that's an alleyway to anybody other than the people in our condos. Then it would be a coded system. We would know the code. I understand having the school across the street, you wouldn't want a place where kids could go off into this alley way. But also, with everything being 2 levels, you can clearly see down. So you would be able to see if somebody had congregated there for whatever reason.
Okay, and if I may?
Sure.
And the gate you're referring to at the end of the alley, it's a solid gate?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Well, it hasn't been designed, but our hope is just that it would look just like part of the fence. I mean,
okay,
would
I
have
understand.
to be
So when you're
obvious.
driving by, it looks like one fence.
Sure.
But the reality is, be it homeless, kids back there smoking, drinking, whatever kind of thing, once they climbed over this 6-foot fence or whatever, or somebody in your backyard is able to see into your yard because they would be in that 3-foot alleyway.
Well, I have a 6-foot fence with a
Okay.
trellis, and there will also be a fence for this new development. And there would be just a 3-foot area that we could run away if we needed to, or we could bring somebody in. So if we're on the 2nd floor and we look down, we could see if somebody was in the alley. It's not ideal. I prefer option B, which allows there to be a driveway there. And that way, you know, if we needed to bring in equipment to remove a tree or something like that, we could.
Okay. And last point, if I may, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. It was mentioned earlier about the condo heights.
Yeah.
Being taller and dominated, et cetera. And my understanding from staff is the condo heights average 28 to 30 feet, so they're actually taller than the proposed homes.
Well, if you noticed on the drawing, many of the homes have flat roofs.
Yes.
And some of them have peaked roofs.
Yep, every other one. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
No further questions?
Okay,
Thank you. Next up, Citizen Ray.
Yes, some community comments, if you will. I don't live there, but I sure care about it because it's part of our Los Gatos community. And, you know, when I hear these comments from Bud Lortz, who's our community development director, he's theoretically supposed to be a steward of the community, correct? I hear these comments about what moves, what sells, coming out of his mouth, and I say, this guy's not a public servant. He's a real estate agent in disguise, okay? This is Los Gatos Realtors, including Ms. Fagoni, because she tells Lortz what to do, always, okay? It's so disgusting from a community standpoint. It just makes me almost want to throw up when I hear this terrible anti-community comments from the director of development, okay? And I want to point out to you that the physical layout of this property results in the following if you approve this Measure C. Side setbacks abutting the street reduced from 20 feet to 5 foot. Adjacent to a private street, 18 foot, okay, from 20 foot. The front setbacks from 25 feet to 18 feet. Rear setbacks from 20 feet to 14 feet. Typical lot width from 60 feet to 50 feet. Lot area, reducing the standard 8,000 square foot lot to 3,800. The standards are all in place for RM12, all right? And that's what we're talking about. And for this man over here to say we don't have any standards, he's a liar. Bald-faced liar. The standards are right there. And you need to know that the Planning Commission gave them all the direction they needed, all right? At the last meeting, the Planning Commission, as you saw from the minutes, asked them if they wanted to go back and have the Planning Commission continue the hearing and give them a chance to meet the conditions suggested by the Planning Commission. They said, no, we want to go to the council because they're a patsy. That's what they're saying in effect by coming to you. They bypassed the Planning Commission totally.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
So
Are there any
may I say,
questions?
send it back to the Planning Commission.
Are there any questions of Mr. Davis? No. Next speaker is Michael Scott.
Good evening. My name is Michael Scott, and I lived at 16965 Roberts Road for the past 17 years. I'm here today to support the development of this vacant lot, which has over the years become a local eyesore. The area would clearly improve if used for housing rather than commercial use. Eden Homes have worked hard to seek the opinions and meet the needs of local residents, starting over 2 years ago with a neighborhood meeting which was held at Van Meter School and which I attended. And I was very pleased to see that somebody at long last was going to do something about that corner lot. The project will also include a much-needed sidewalk along Roberts Road, which is important to the well-being and safety of local residents and the children attending Fisher School. I am disappointed that the members of the Planning Commission could not agree with the proposal, as I feel that it is high time that something be done about this blighted area. Houses and nice landscaping similar to Sierra Court on the opposite corner seems to me to be an ideal solution. Your consideration is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Let's see if there are any questions for you. And there are not. Thank you. The last card I have is for Christine, could be Cerny? Curry?
Good evening, Council. Good evening. I'm a parent. I live here in Los Gatos. My concern, I feel like it's a slippery slope. You know, if you start changing for a project that does look lovely, it's still a zoning question. And I guess I feel like, you know, Roberts Road is already, it's a tight fit in there. And I think that, you know, with so many kids now on their bicycles, you know, as a parent in and out of that street, I really hope that you look at the fact that this has been before you on at least 3 other occasions. They brought up something about the lack of environmental impact. Well, I disagree. They're going to have to mitigate or remove at least 40 trees. Well, yeah, they're going to add some trees, but you know what? They still got to take it all out. I moved to Los Gatos because it's a fabulous neighborhood, because the schools are amazing, because we don't look like Sunnyvale. We don't have a little community that looks like every other cookie cutter community that has taken the advantage of the real estate prices. Granted, let them develop it, but do you have to build 7 homes? I don't understand the importance of saying, well, you know, we're gonna have a green space and we're gonna do all this for the local community. There's no community space. I have little kids. You know, the idea of not having a spot for my kids to play, I can't even fathom even wanting to invest. So I guess I look to you as our council, as our leadership here in Los Gatos, that maybe, you know, go back and look at the plans that they submitted in 2003. You know, why has it been in front of the Planning Commission on so many different occasions? And yet, here we are, now it's in front of the council. And I guess I'm just asking you to take into account the density, the traffic, the minuscule amount that they're adding. Okay, the community good, $15,000 for these sidewalks. That's great. Look how much money they're going to make on this community effort. You know, I can't. I'm not in real estate, so I don't know what they're going to make. But I got to imagine it's you know, the $15,000 they're going to put towards the community good. It doesn't. I don't know. It just rings hollow for me. So I'm just hoping that you look at this very, very carefully. The next development that they potentially put on the books here for Los Gatos, they may say, well, you know, they rezoned this space on Roberts Road, so gee, maybe it's okay, we can, and then where does it end? Where do we stop the rezoning? I mean, we live in a lovely community because it is lovely. I'm not being a Luddite and saying let's not change it, but let's just be careful with the zoning, because I really do feel like it's a slippery slope. Thank you.
Thank you. Wait. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. And it's Mrs. Curry? It's my wife's maiden name, so it was easy to understand. A couple of questions about comments you made. What is there now, I'm sure you agree, is a long-time blighted condition. And what is being proposed there, do you agree that residential is the preferred use?
Oh, absolutely residential.
Okay. And I just got three questions, if I can just whip them right out to you so I don't extend our meeting too long. The zoning now is RM 5 to 12, looking to go to RM 512 with the PD. And they're proposing 7 units.
Versus the 12, which could be there.
That's the range, yes, but they're on the 7 end, be that as may. Well, I was listening to you talk, and you were talking about the increased intensity and more cars coming out onto Roberts where it's already so crowded, as Councilmember Glickman said, you know, twice a day, it's unbelievable. But when all was said and done, you agree that housing belongs there, that 6 would be okay, 7 seems a little much. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that what you were saying?
I'm not sure. I'm not an architect. I'm just hoping that you go through the minutia of the paperwork that's been presented to the Planning Commission on the last 4 years. Okay. Because the little bit I've seen just on the web, there's an infinite amount of information there that probably wasn't brought to our attention this evening that I had the opportunity to look over this weekend. So that was my concern, is that maybe, you know, the information that was in the lovely presentation tonight was not maybe the whole story.
Sure. And the third and final question, very quickly. When somebody comes in, develops a property, creates what in effect is a neighborhood with houses facing forward, do you see them as having an obligation to create an open area within that development for those 5, 6, 7 homes, whatever?
Absolutely. Okay,
as compared to the open street, the front lawns, the backyards, the whatever. But just your personal opinion.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that, you know, there needs to be more green space.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, otherwise the density is too big, you know. There's just too many people in an enclosed space without enough place to, you know, ride a bike or get on your scooter and go to school.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to speak this evening on this? Then I'm going to ask the applicant to come back up for up to 5 minutes of summary rebuttal. Before I do that, Mr. Lortz, do you want to answer Mrs. Spector's question regarding noise studies?
Yes. The noise measurements are taken at grade. The requirement is that the units be soundproofed to the state standards. So the second floor would receive sound attenuation to meet those state standards.
If I might.
Yes, go ahead.
So if I understand what you're saying, in my life experience, noise travels up. The second floor is noisier than the first floor, but whoever took these sound measurements took it from the first floor, and then you're saying that whatever the second floor noise level is, it's going to be taken care of by the construction?
Yeah. Yes.
Why not take the measurements from the second floor?
Because they're typically taken at ground level, and sound does travel up, but it also travels horizontal. So your noise decibel levels probably are going to be very, very similar between 5 feet off the ground versus 20 feet off the ground.
Thank you.
Mr. Glickman, did you have a question for staff also?
I do, for our town attorney, because more than half of the speakers addressed the issue of access. Could you just give us a quick recap of the legal status of access and I don't want to use words like adverse possession, but if you could just enlighten us to what the current legal status of the access is and what the various potential obligations might be.
Mr. Korb, do you want to do that now, or do you want to do it after we close the public hearing?
Whatever is your pleasure, Madam Mayor.
And I'm fine either way.
Why don't we go ahead and finish up the public hearing, and then we'll go into staff. So we'll finish you up. So up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about the open space because it has been brought up, why don't we have common open space? We're on the corner of Blossom Hill Road and Roberts Road, which is very noisy. So we focus more on creating private yards rather than, say, a community barbecue area, which we felt probably would not be used in this area because it is a noisy intersection. The site is very close to Vasona Park and it's very close to Oak Meadow Park. With regards to the access to the condominium units, we hope that the dialogue is still open. We hope to work out a solution that both parties are happy with. I don't want to disclose, I guess, what the proposals are right now because I don't know that any one of them is an answer that's agreeable to both parties. But I do hope that the dialogue is still open and that we're still working on it. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. Spector.
She says with chagrin. A couple of questions, or one question really. With regard to units 1 and 2.
Yes.
I understood what you said as to why you designed them the way you did. But why not flip them so that they both face the main driveway? Not the hammerhead, but the main driveway.
You mean the private road?
Yes, your private road.
If we did that, then we would have the rear yards facing onto Blossom Hill, which would give us more sound wall.
But that would be a good thing, right?
Not necessarily. It was my impression.
Oh, you would need more of a sound wall? Okay, and explain to me why that is.
Well, because of the fronts of the units are facing the private drive, their rear yards would be facing Blossom Hill.
Right, and now you have the side of the home facing Blossom Hill and the side of the backyard facing Blossom Hill.
Yes, which gives you less length in sound wall.
All right, thank you.
Or fencing.
Yes, for fencing.
Maybe we're talking
fencing
different
is probably
words
a better
here.
word.
Okay. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, Mr. Liu. I've got a question for you, and you just said a minute ago that you're not at liberty to discuss whatever is going on back and forth between you and the association. I respect that. I look at this and I look at the situation that we're in now because you want to put a fence up on your property line, which removes emergency access and access for service and all the rest. And the first thing that reflects into my mind is that those condos were poorly planned. As far the condos were poorly planned in the fact that they didn't foresee if a fence was put up on the property line, they would lose access to the backyard. And what I'm hearing, and please tell me if I'm incorrect, is to get lawnmowers and stump grinders to their backyard, they'd have to go through the living room.
Either that or go through their neighbors' yard.
Or through their neighbors. Okay, given that, and the emergency access and the alley and the everything else, and I certainly agree you did not create this problem. Whenever this condo was designed, the problem was created because they didn't see the property line. I need help to understand what your side of this issue, the applicant, is contemplating doing to help with this problem. I need to hear from you to know what kind of ideas you're kicking around or possibilities or something, because I'm very uncomfortable with the fact of allowing your development, which then landlocks this other development.
Okay.
And I don't want to make a decision until I've got more information.
Well, okay, I guess what we've talked about so far is creating some sort of a passageway, you can call it an alley, but some sort of a passageway between our property and theirs. Now, I guess the debate is whether or not it's on their property, whether or not it's on our property, or whether it's half and half. And that's kind of the gist of what's going on right now. And then the other issue is whether or not they have what their rights are, what our property owners' rights are, and what the compensation is for access if there is one.
Okay, and I've got one quick question for you. If I may, I'll make a one-sentence statement.
Statement? No statements.
No,
Just
question.
questions.
One question. Without committing you to anything, you're perfectly fine if they have a 3-foot alley on their property, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we are going to
Madam
close.
Mayor, if I could ask the architect one final question.
We're not closing the public hearing.
Let's
Come
change
on
it.
back.
Although it's been repeated numerous times in these past Planning Commission hearings, I need to know why the number is 7 rather than 6, since it could go to 5. And to me, that is the salient issue. The design of the property really is what dictates the number of units that can be built on that property. The size of the units is the other factor that contributes to the outcome. And the 5 to 12 is all predicated on square footage and what would be feasible within that particular square footage, that footprint. And I know that the developer has insisted that it's got to be 7. I guess I need a rationale that convinces me that it has to be 7. Because that seems to be the underlying issue that has driven this entire discussion with the Planning Commission. Could you say something to that?
Well, I guess, some of it goes back to compatibility and being consistent with the other, with the surrounding neighborhoods. If you had 6 units, the units would probably be larger footprints. We would have maybe 2,500 square foot homes as opposed to 18 to 1,900 square foot homes. And I think for that intersection, for that corner, it's much better to have a smaller home than a larger home. I think being on a corner where there's a lot of traffic, a larger home would not be as desirable from a living standpoint, from a sales standpoint.
But that argument assumes that the square footage, the total square footage, has to be the same. It cannot be reduced by that 1 square footage unit. It's the mathematical equation could say just what you said, or it could say remove that 1 unit, keep the size the same, reconfigure the homes on the site. You've indicated that the smaller home is more viable for that size property in that particular location, given the noise impacts and traffic impacts. But you've also indicated that you've designed this for that square footage, and that's what you want to achieve. Now, to me, to say that's what we want to achieve, that is the question of it penciling out for the developer, correct? And that's the sole driver behind that. Could we say, and this is a question, okay, could we say that we could reevaluate using the same square footage in those units, using the same design, but with the reduction of 1, what would that do to the impacts, particularly those things that the Planning Commission was asking you to consider?
Well, I guess if you look at the layout that we have 7 units spread out on the site, and the spacing of them, the placement of them, it works pretty well. It fits the site. If we were to take out 1 unit, let's say the one on the narrow portion of the site, it really does not change any aspect of the site. I mean, the perception of the development is going to be the same. The spacing of the buildings is pretty much going to be the same. It basically leaves you property which I think is not used to the most efficient level. I think with the need for housing here, we, as a designer, we look for ways to design the land in the most efficient way. And 7 seems to be the number that works. I mean, it's not only a number that the developer has said, this is what I want. Seems to be what fits right.
Okay, I guess I'll take that as your answer to that question, and probably we'll revisit this a little later in the meeting.
Mrs. Spector? Through the mayor, a question of the last speaker, Mr. Brzezinski, if I might.
Okay.
He mentioned that why not consider 6, 5? We can't do 5, and I was just curious as to how he came to that conclusion.
Actually, I didn't conclude we can't do 5. I just said, let's take a look at 6.
Okay, any additional questions of the speaker so we can close public hearing? Mr. Glickman.
Yeah, let me go back to the issue that Mr. Brzezinski raised and Councilwoman Spector touched on, because we heard the expression penciling out. This project, this specific project, if I read the Planning Commission notes correctly, has been going on for over 2 years. So I would like to know the same question, that if in fact we reduce the economic viability of this by reducing the number of units, right now we've got what everybody pretty much agrees is an eyesore on that site. So I want to know how feasible the project becomes for the developer if we start eating into the number of homes.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that. I mean, certainly 6 units is going to, have less value than 7.
Would you wish to refer to? Okay, thank you.
Actually, as far as the financial aspect of the project, as far as
I'm sorry, you need to identify yourself since you've not been up here before.
I'm the developer of this project, owner of this project, and actually, initially when I bought this project, we did the financial studies, definitely as you do in all the projects, and it works with a lot more units than 7. As the zoning was saying, was RM 5 to 12, we were thinking on the higher side, on that zoning number. But we came to the, city, town, we discussed all the options, and so this 7 does not come like 7. We started with townhomes, and then we got the impression that townhomes don't work. Then we go with single family, with more units, bigger units, and we go back. So we compromises a lot. And the way the land value right now is going, it's financially make it not feasible to do, smaller units and less units and make it work. So I mean, it is a financial thing too, but, also this is I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have,
Can I just add one thing to what he said?
if it's 30 seconds.
Yeah, I guess, we've been working with the town staff for the last 2.5 to 3 years, and we've worked with them on developing the concept, the spacing between units, the size of the units, and the number. And I think that's where the number comes from as well. It's not a number that we just drew up. Like Coram said, we started with townhomes, then we went to 8, then we went to 7. And so we've arrived here because this is what the town staff even supported.
Thank you. Okay, now we are closing the public hearing and opening it up for council discussion. We're going to start with, we have the question from Mr. Glickman to Mr. Korb, and after that I'm going to ask Mr. Lortz to run through for us once again all of our options of actions that we can take, and then when we go into discussion, instead of jumping into a motion, I'd like to get a sense as to where everyone is at, because we have a whole series of technical steps that need to be taken depending on where we are. So that's the game plan. So we'll start with Mr. Korb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to Councilmember Glickman's question, As you know, based on the testimony, the residents of the condominium have been using the property, the subject property, for access, but do not have, as a matter of record, any established legal right of access to the property. That means that they can't require that they be provided access, nor does it mean that the subject property owner has an obligation to provide that access. I cannot comment on whether there are facts sufficient for the property owners in the condominium to assert an implied right of access based on the facts and circumstances current. That, again, would be a private matter between the property owners to resolve, just as would be a negotiation between them if they wanted to try to avoid going to court on that question. And I think that's the answer to the question.
Mr. Glickman, did that help you?
It did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Lortz, so run us through again, please, what all of our options are this evening.
You have several options. You can deny the project. You can remand the project back to the Planning Commission for redesign. You could approve the project, or you could approve the project with additional conditions, including anything that you would want to direct us to take a look at through the ANS process. I wanted to expand on my answer to Councilmember Spector's question about noise. The reason the noise levels are practically taken at ground level is because that's where we're trying to attenuate for outdoor noise levels. It's rather easy to attenuate for indoor noise levels. Other than an open window, you can do that through construction.
And in terms of if we approve it with additional conditions or send it so that staff works out the details, can that include the arrangement with the neighbors so that we can put that issue aside and not or
well, that's going to be
do you see what I'm saying?
That's going to be complicated for a couple of reasons. If council as a group would want to see whether there would be some resolution to that question, then given the fact that the resolution can have an impact on the design of the project, it's probably best not to be deciding on the detail of the project, which you would be doing by approving a PD, short of having that question answered. If you were to give direction to staff regarding that issue, you would have to give fairly specific direction regarding how that redesign would occur or not occur, because again, once you decide the PD, you are laying out the map for the project.
Okay.
I probably should add at this point, just for the record and to remind council, there are two basic types of land use decisions that council often faces. One is the situation where you're asked to consider and approve a project that is largely consistent with the existing zoning and rules of the zoning district. Those are generally quasi-judicial proceedings. And there are situations where someone makes an application to change the zoning. In other words, makes an application to do something that they're not otherwise entitled to do. Those are legislative decisions over which the council has a great deal of discretion. So I just wanted to remind council of that tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to open for discussion and comment. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I'll start us off here, and in addressing council, one of the biggest concerns I have is this access to the backyard because of the design of the condos. And it's a fact. They exist the way they do, and it's a fact the property line is where it is. And so for me, the height, the FAR, the density, the intensity, all of those issues to me seem to have been hashed out pretty darn well over the past. Where I'm at right now is this last portion, which is this idea of a 3-foot alley, which is in negotiations. And I don't know, Madam Mayor, if we end up, where we end up and what action we take. But for me, it's very, very important that this alley issue get resolved. And what I'll throw out for council discussion and consideration, if I may, is the fact that the condo association wants to have access to their property. And if that's something they want, then at the very least, they should give up some of their property. So one idea is a 3-foot alley on their property. One idea Mr. Louie brought up is 50-50, and one idea is a 3-foot alley on the applicant's property. For myself, and what I'm suggesting to council's consideration, is that that 3-foot alley not be entirely on the applicant's property, but say split 50-50. The cost to build it be 50-50. The applicants consider that additional community benefit, but the maintenance of it, since it's for the homeowners association, the homeowners association maintains it, splits half the cost, and chips in half the land because it's for their benefit. And I know that's something you're not prepared to answer. You need to discuss and do that, and I understand that. And the homeowners association is not prepared because they're not represented either to do that. But for myself, before I can approve this project as it currently stands, I think we have to deal with the fact that they can't get a lawnmower to the back to their backyard without going through the kitchen, as silly and dramatic as that sounds. And I think that we have to do something about that. And then I think it's important that we decide, since we're the court of last resort, who it's equitably fair that that responsibility, that cost falls on. And that's kind of why I've broken it up that way. And that's my suggestion.
Okay, let's see what other comments people have. Mr. Lichtman.
Well, thank you. And I very much appreciate and share Councilmember Wasserman's concern for the wishes, desires, and needs of the folks who live in the condo who have, over the years, been used to having this access, although the access was on somebody else's land. And I want to tread very cautiously here because everything that we do sets precedent. And I want to be very careful about setting the precedent of, even in light of what Mr. Korb told us, that there's no legal requirement to do it, that we sort of set the legal requirement and say, well, if you want to build on an existing piece of property that other people have used, you're going to have to somehow continue to provide them with access. I want to walk very cautiously about doing that. On the other hand, since we've heard the folks who are currently living there, who live in the condos, express this very strong desire to have access, I would wonder whether, even for their benefit, the optimal solution is a permanent easement, alleyway access for exactly the reasons that Mr. Wasserman mentioned earlier, that there are negative security issues associated with that. Maybe we all like our own suggestions, but I was thinking of the question that I'd asked, because this is presumably something that's going to be used fairly infrequently, that if the folks who live in the middle condos who, if this new land is now unavailable to them, become, quote, landlocked in their backyards, can approach their neighbors, and we talked about these key cards and gates that can be used in an emergency. If they could among themselves work out an access method so that on the hopefully rare occasions you have to move something really large into the backyard, you don't bring it through the kitchen, you hopefully with the written agreement of your neighbors have the right of access. But I want to be a little bit careful about imposing on somebody who owns a piece of land where the law doesn't require it, the right to, just because somebody's used it before, not just, because somebody's used it before, to continue to give them that right of access, because we're making a fairly significant legal step in precedent when we do that. So it also occurs to me that as I look at the diagram, we have back-to-back backyards. Nothing, hopefully, is going to get built on them. I mean, we addressed an issue like that recently where somebody had built a swimming pool on somebody else's easement. So that those fences at, I think, a fairly modest cost could be reconfigured in the future as the new people move in and address what they are and are not comfortable in their own backyards. So with that, I would be a little loath to be imposing solutions, especially when it seems to me that, given the fact that right now it's just fences, that there is the opportunity to reconfigure at a modest cost and some degree of agreement between the existing neighbors and the people who are about to become their new neighbors.
Okay, do we, let's have some comments on the project itself. Mrs. Spector.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to discuss. First of all, I concur with all of you who have spoken and said that regardless of what your feelings are about the project, you think that the land should be developed because you think it's an eyesore or whatever. And I totally agree. However, we have to look at how it's going to be developed, and the fact that it's one of the last few remaining pieces of property in Los Gatos gives you some indication of the fact that it's going to be a challenge to develop that property. The applicant before us this evening is asking for a rezoning. They're asking for a planned development. The current zone is an RM zone, and that zone has its own requirements. It does allow, even though it's a residential multiple, it does allow for single-family homes on a minimum lot of 8,000 square feet with a front yard setback of 25 feet, a rear yard setback of 20 feet, a side single-family home setback of 10 feet, and a lot coverage of 40%. So without getting a PD, plan development, it is possible to put single-family homes on this piece of land. So then we go to the fact, when does Los Gatos, under its ordinances, allow a plan development? And somebody's on the Planning Commission told us, and it's when you have an optimum quality and use of open space and to encourage good design. That is when you allow a PD. And in my opinion, what we have before us tonight does not fulfill the requirement for a PD. The PD is an exception, and it's an exception that is granted to what I consider extraordinary design. Now, what are the shortcomings, in my opinion, of what we do have before us? It has no open space. It has exceptions requested for the side yard setback, the setback abutting the street, the front yard setback, the rear yard setback, the lot width, the lot area. We have, and this is a design feature that is really troublesome to me, of having the two homes, 1 and 2, with their backyards on the side of one house and on the back of the other, facing one another, and having those two homes not facing on to the major private street that goes through it, and the fact that there is no common area. Many of you, or several of you who spoke this evening, spoke to this issue. All of those deficiencies, and even more that the Planning Commission brought up, do not, in my opinion, warrant this being rezoned as a planned development. It is not sufficiently extraordinary. What the benefit that the town is going to get out of this is 7 market-priced units. And the reason that we are at the number 7, I mean, the applicant has told us, he's been very candid at the Planning Commission level. He said it was high priority to keep 7 units from a financial feasibility standpoint. It's a priority to get 7 units on here to make it financially feasible. That is not the basis for a PD. And lastly, my colleagues have spoken to the issue of the easement. Quite frankly, as a lawyer, I'm going to totally agree with Mr. Korb. I don't think it is an issue that we are going to be resolving tonight or that we should be resolving tonight. But, for example, if this project were denied, it would certainly be an issue that I would encourage the parties to continue to discuss.
Vice Mayor Brzezinski, are you going to speaking on the project?
Yes, I am. I would second what Councilwoman Spector said about the easement issue. I don't think that's our issue, unfortunately. I think that from a legal perspective and from the perspective of our obligations to the community, that is something that the applicant and the neighbors need to work to conclusion on. I remember a discussion in another application years ago wherein the property owner, in order to buffer a neighborhood from a parking lot that it was proposing, offered to sell a portion of that lot immediately adjacent to the homes, to those owners, to give them an extended space so that they would have less impacts from the noise that would occur in the parking in that parking lot. And I have visited that site over the years just to see if the solution worked. And as a matter of fact, it has. Every one of the individuals who received that accommodation by buying that property from this applicant very definitely appreciates what they got, but they didn't get something for nothing. They had to purchase the property because, in effect, that property was not theirs, and it would be a taking if they were to merely be granted that property. So I think that that there's sufficient information out there, and obviously some negotiation taking place that is beyond our purview, and and I hope that both sides can work something out to their mutual benefit. Frankly, when I visited the property, I was looking for the gates. I couldn't find them. I had to go back and read the report, making sure that it did say that actually there was access into the vacant property, because those are cleverly concealed gates, certainly from that property. But also on the property, it's really obvious this thing has to be improved. This is an eyesore. It's an attractive nuisance. It is trashed from one end to the other, and it's time to move on with that property. And so I recommend that the property owner move as quickly as possible within our guidelines to be able to accomplish that. However, I think the other comment that Councilman Spector made is also quite to the point. I'm thinking that we need to take a look at this property. It's a strangely configured property. I think that there's been a good deal of consternation voiced over the various proposals here, but I would think that we could continue to look at this at the lowest end, and 5 or 6 would be at the lowest end, and say to the developer, appreciate your concerns, take another look at that. This property does not lend itself to the maximizing of the use that you are proposing, but if I look at that, then I think all the other requests from the Planning Commission can be accommodated. I do not intend for us to carry this on another 5 years. This is just inappropriate. From the point of view of the benefit to the community, I can't stand looking at that site for another 5 years. And I think that we need to move on with it, but we need to move quickly now. Let's make some accommodations. Let's get to close on this. And so my recommendation would be very similar to what Councilwoman Spector is saying, is that we probably don't need a PD here. We probably can take a look at the standard requirements and come up with a viable use of that property.
Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. And my question's for Mr. Lortz, if I may.
Certainly.
Mr. Lortz, there's nothing prohibiting the homeowner association from making an alley easement on their own property, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll throw in a couple of comments, and then we're going to kind of see where we are. When I look at this property, I do not see it as large single-family homes on a traditional size lot. I am a fan of having spaces in the town where we have the small lots with single-family homes on it, because I think it adds to the variety of the housing stock, and it's very appealing for young families who are trying to get into the market and who prefer a single-family home and having a private yard to moving into a condo or townhouse. The alternative use for this property is to do townhomes, and he said he had looked at that, and it would certainly be compatible with the neighborhood around it. But I sure would prefer to see the small lot single-family homes. I think what we're struggling with is what Mr. Lortz mentioned early at the beginning, and that's the lack of guidelines for this kind of development that I do think requires the exceptions that the PD brings about. When you talk about common open space, I live down the street here. There's no common open space on my neighborhood. In a traditional neighborhood where most of us live, we don't have little open spaces for barbecues. We have a front yard, we have a backyard, sometimes we have a side yard. Traditionally, in a traditional neighborhood, your backyard backs up against another backyard. So I don't find it odd, the configuration of the two homes out towards the front. And I kind of thought it was ingenious to move them, because that did meet the recommendation of the Planning Commission to have them facing out. So the alley situation, or what's going to end up happening with the neighbors and the access to the backyard, I think has been expressed that is not something that we can solve tonight. So, Council, the question is, are we willing to do something regarding the proposal that's in front of us, of either approving it, denying it, all of those options that Mr. Lortz had laid out? Mr. Glickman.
Madam Mayor, do you feel it's time for a motion?
Well,
I could make one anyway, but
Well,
out of courtesy, I defer to your wishes to run the meeting.
and I'm looking over to get Mr. Korb's attention, because we have a whole lot of little technical things that we have to do down here, if you look on the bottom of page 1 of your staff report. Mr. Korb, do you think that we are in a position now that we should start through these, or what is your recommendation?
My recommendation would be, if you have someone who wishes to make a motion up or down or back or forth on the project, to get a consensus of the council regarding that motion before you start running through all the steps required, because some of these steps may not be required if that motion doesn't fly.
Okay, so hypothetically, Mr. Glickman, if you were to make a motion, what would it be?
The motion that I would make is to approve the project as presented. I heartily concur with what I've heard from the other council members, that this is neither the time, place, or venue to resolve the access issue, that we would encourage all the people involved. So the question then for me is this project okay? I know some of the issues that have been raised about a common area and so forth, and in that area, on that issue, I have to concur with the mayor. I live in the Almond Grove. It's a fairly eclectic neighborhood. Houses either have backyards, or some of them, like mine, don't. But there aren't dedicated common areas, and yet that neighborhood works very well. So as I look at this particular project on this particular site, having had some reassurance that the traffic issue via Fisher Middle School has been adequately resolved, that the layout of the project seems to be consistent with the sorts of things we want in town. It adds to our housing stock. The world isn't going to change whether it's going to be 7 or 6. And the person who owns the property, after having worked with us for 2.5 years, is telling us that it's economically probably not very feasible, and it's an eyesore right now. Is this the best project that was ever conceived in the eye of man and God? Probably not. But is it okay? And to me, it's okay. As a matter of fact, I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty nice. If I had the money, I'd consider buying one of them if it was built. I think that there are many, many families who would like to live there. I don't think it in any way harms our town. So the direction of the motion would be to approve the project. We can do some tweaking, but that would be the motion that I would make if there was consensus to support it.
Okay, so let's just do a quick scan, see, and hypothetically, Mrs. Spector, would you support that kind of a motion?
I would hypothetically not, or in reality not.
Okay. And Mr. Przinski?
At this time, I'm not ready to support.
And Mr. Wasserman?
Mr. Lickman said with tweaking. So I wondered what you meant by support. I mean, approve the motion, approve it with tweaking. Are you saying approve it, or what's the tweaking?
Well, we can always approve it with conditions, and I would be very open to hear what my fellow council members suggested. But the approval is for 7 units in substantially this layout.
Mr. Wasserman?
I can't approve it carte blanche, no. Not as is.
Okay. So we've got 3 no's and 1 yes, and hypothetically I might be a yes, so where are we here?
Well, it sounds like you don't have enough votes to approve that motion if it were to go down that, in that direction. So perhaps someone else who is on the other side of that motion wishes to propose another motion, because there are obviously a lot of options regarding alternative actions.
Perhaps, Mr. Wasserman, if I could put you on the spot, if I could probe your comment that carte blanche, so what kind of a
Yes, ma'am.
motion would you like to make?
Well, Mr. Glickman was very gracious in saying what he said, and depending on what the amendments are, and so I'll toss out some for consideration. The issue that I'm struggling with, and I agree it's not the applicant's issue. The applicant simply wants to put a fence on their property line. If I've understood this correctly, and it also ties into a comment, Mr. Glickman, you made about the access being used infrequently, I'd like some sort of clarification. When the people mow their lawn in the back, how do they take their clippings out to the street? Do they go through the house? And the reason I'm asking that is I'm trying to figure out how I can approve this. And overall, I think it's pretty good too. I think the design, the FAR, the height, everything, so I'm 90% with you as far as that goes. The appropriateness in that area, the sidewalks, all the other parts, the 2.5 years, the 3 years with the Planning Commission, working out all the issues, I'm all there. But what I'm having a problem with, and it's not your responsibility, but I'm having a problem with, is landlocking these people from an access point, and I'm trying to visualize, they mow their lawn, put it in the baggies, there's a fence in their backyard, so do they take it through the kitchen?
Yes, it's not unusual in a townhouse development where you actually do have to take things through the unit. A lot of times if somebody has a yard in their back, which is not unusual for a townhouse development, they'll put a garden shed out there and keep their things out there.
Okay.
Now, this is a condo project, so I don't believe they own their backyards. I believe the homeowners association owns their backyards.
Correct, they would just own the land. Okay, so given all that, I'll throw out for your consideration is I'm okay with approving this development as it's designed, space, height, FAR, everything else. But is there some way to put in there? No, there's not.
So this
No,
is
there's not. I'm going to just give.
Excuse me, Mr. Wasserman. So this is actually a question of staff. So what you're saying is there a way to approve this project with the assurance that there'll be some kind of a negotiation that's compatible for both sides when we don't have control over that?
No, there's not. And you put me on the spot, like you said, so I'm speaking a little awkwardly, but I think I've regrouped here. So I'll try and say it, and we'll move on.
Okay.
I will approve the motion as you stated. And I'm doing that based on, Mr. Lortz, you're telling me that the homeowner association has the right, if they wish, to move their property fence line in 3 or 4 feet, to give themselves their own access alleyway for emergency purposes and for stump grinders and for whatever else they want to do. They can do that. The applicant is not under any obligation to help them out. From my heart, would I wish that you would consider the situation that you're putting up a fence on your own property line is creating. I would ask you to consider that in your negotiations with them. Okay? I would hope that we just don't approve the plan with 3 or more votes here, and then you say adios. But again, that you're not under any obligation, of course, to do that.
Mr. Lortz or Mr. Korb, is there a way for council or staff to monitor the progress of these negotiations as they come back through the process for A&S and so on?
We can certainly monitor them. We just can't influence them. If you approve the PD as proposed, then who knows what will happen with the negotiations. But we can certainly monitor them.
You have additional comment? No.
I do want to just make one additional comment. I respect Mr. Lortz's comments concerning the ownership or control of the yards. I don't really know, and we don't have the information regarding who does control the yards in the condominium project. But one way or another, whether it's a matter of individual property owners making deals with each other regarding access or the homeowners association controlling it. There is private control over the question of access for all of the members of the homeowners association, separate and apart from what exists with this project. And again, we can't control that.
Mr. Brzezinski, did you want to speak?
Yes, I want to speak against the motion.
We don't have a motion yet.
I want to speak against the theoretical motion.
Yes.
The proto motion.
Only from this perspective, why is this so difficult? Why has this been going on so long? Why is it that we can't do what Mr. Scott asked us to do, which is get something out there? And I think it's because the thing, it just doesn't fit. There's an underlying issue that hasn't been addressed, and that is our difficulty in making this thing fit. And I am not compelled by the argument that the developer makes that well, we've decided on 7. We thought we could do 12, maybe townhomes, so we've kind of moved around and come down to this, and now we've kind of settled. The fact that the design is basically the first design they came to the table with, and that was all in terms of the access street, says to me, really, that we have been moving in circles and have not actually moved towards a conclusion that accommodates some of the initial issues that were presented. I think that there's argument to be made for a revisiting of that property. When I was out there just this weekend, it seemed to me that particularly lots 6 and 7 were really tight, and that the configuration of lots 1 and 2, that was a strange configuration. I think that the highest noise impacts are going to be at lot 1, because that's where this traffic light is. Therefore you're going to get the stop and start noise. That's the highest impact in terms of the right turn from Roberts to Blossom Hill. That would be northbound Roberts to eastbound Blossom Hill. And that, to me, is a prime site to be looked at in terms of a pullback. What can you do out in that area that would buffer the rest of this neighborhood? I just don't think that we're at the point now where we could say to approve a PD means to approve this footprint. That's what we're going to do tonight. If we say yes to this, we approve this footprint, and that's what then will be developed. And I don't think that we're at the point of doing that. The Planning Commission seemed very confounded in its last meeting, and it was a relatively short hearing because they said, it looks like nothing's changed, so I guess we should go with what you asked, to deny. The issue being, let's deny it here so it goes to council. Well, it's at council. But I don't think that it's quite clear to all of us tonight that the direction has been set, and we know what we want to do with this property. I would say it would be appropriate to ask the developer and the architect to take one more look at this thing, to reduce it by at least a unit, to see what they can do to pencil it in. It may be much more capable of being penciled than you think. And at this particular moment in time, take a look at some of the issues of how we can buffer this property, create more open space so that there is more livable space. I'm not inclined, I agree with the mayor, I think it's more a question of how do you gain space so that families, even small families who want to come into a property in Los Gatos for the first time, can be able to find a space that accommodates their needs. And I'm concerned about a couple of properties that we've approved that looked really good, seemed to answer all these questions, and then when they were finally in the ground, it seemed very, very constrained. And I don't want us to do that with this property. So that would be my recommendation. If there is a motion made, if there is the intent of a motion, and since it looks like there's a majority who's interested, then I would not support that, but I would be willing to make the motion, frankly, to do a return to the Planning Commission with that request.
And Mr. Korb, you had something you wanted to say?
Just simply that it appears at this point that it might be appropriate to, based on, I think, Mr. Glickman's initial interest, to start proceeding down the steps for final action. And I think Mr. Glickman probably wanted to start that off.
Mrs. Spector? Well, is that true, Mr. Wasserman, that we're set to start an actual motion? Or are you rethinking?
I'm rethinking, yes, and I had questions from Mr. Brzezinski, so I'm certainly can go after Ms. Spector.
Could I ask staff a question before you get started on your question?
Sure.
Is there any advantage to us continuing this to our next council meeting so that applicant has a chance to think over comments they've heard?
Well, you've stated one advantage, and another advantage would certainly be the opportunity for the parties to discuss whether there is any private solution to the access issue that you've heard about tonight. It would be a complicated solution, I think, based on some of the options, but again, it's for them to resolve.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, a 2-week timeout would be advantageous. I don't know, council, what you think. I don't know, applicant, what you think. Mr. Glickman?
Well, after 2.5 years, what's 2 weeks? I would say this. It has been pointed out to us that we really don't have, or probably shouldn't have, the legal basis for dictating a solution. But in hearing the discussions going on and getting a sense of, I think I got a sense of where the majority is, and I'm particularly sensitive to the concerns raised by Mr. Wasserman, I would wonder if we were to continue it and give both the applicant and the condo association a clear indication of our expectations of what would come back to us at the next meeting in terms of a solution in good faith, then I would be willing to not make the motion to approve it tonight, but to give clear direction and indication that, if I've heard people correctly, the majority approves the project. We want to see a solution in place for the access issue. Would I be correct in assuming, because I will say that for myself, that if this came to us with a solution to the access issue, but this layout, 7 units, I'd approve it?
Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you. And may I ask my question to Ms. Spector now?
You may ask your question to the world, and we'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. And I apologize for not looking over here. I'm just looking where I'm talking. In my 4 years on council, I've seen a number of projects come across our way, and except for homes on large acreages or up in the hillsides, this project has the largest side setbacks, none of those 0 lot lines that I don't like, and the 4-foot exceptions to our 5-foot minimums. This has got minimum 7.5 feet on each side. When this project came before me, I said, wow, these people are not trying to stretch the envelope and ask for another variance on sides. When I look across the street to Sarah Court, and I look at this one, I look at similar FARs and heights, et cetera. So from my perspective, this came across as a very good project, a nice little residential area. You mentioned, Mrs. Spector, and it was beyond me, and that's why I was asking for clarification. You mentioned about this project going forward without the need for a PD. And I wondered if you could please elaborate on that. Can this project become a little 7-house neighborhood without that?
Actually, that sounds more like a question for staff.
Probably not, because you'd need a standard street. 60-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
So I'm kind of thinking the continuance would be a really good idea to give applicant and neighbors a chance to talk and everyone else a chance to pull together their thoughts. Mrs. Spector?
Thank you. And I might make the motion, but probably not in the form that you would like it. First of all, Mr. Brzezinski raised a really good question. And his question is, why is it so difficult? Why has this piece of property been going around, circles for 3 years and been before the Planning Commission all kinds of times? And the answer is very simple. Because of the number of units that the applicant is trying to place on the property. Many, many years ago, I was on the Planning Commission, and I served with all different kinds of personalities. And I served with this woman who was very tall and very large. And I actually remember the evening she looked at an applicant and said, "You know, sir, you're trying to put a size 16 lady in a size 4 dress." And that always impressed itself upon me, and that's what I feel that is trying to happen now. I think that this application should be continued, but not simply to allow the parties and the neighbors to reconsider the backyard easement, but also to have the applicant consider reducing the units and taking units number 1 and 2 and having them face the street, and putting the parking, the public parking on the common area, and having more open space. And I'm going to tell you, let's get this going. For those reasons, I'm going to make a motion to continue this.
Is there a second? I will second. Any further discussion? Mr. Glickman?
Okay, I would like to support the motion, but not the signing statement. I would have approved the project as it was, in deference to the very legitimate and I think heartfelt concerns that Mr. Wasserman raised. I would be willing to continue it to get the access issue resolved and to give very clear direction to the applicant that that is the issue that needs to be resolved. I wouldn't support a motion where the indication is we'd like you to come back and do it with 5 or 6. I just wouldn't support that.
The motion, as I understood it, is only to continue. Everything else was advanced copy that had no relationship to the motion. So,
but I question then what message, what direction we're giving to the applicant. What are we looking for to come for them to come back to us with when the time certain and the date certain is reached?
I don't think we can give them anything specific other than they've heard the comments of all the council members. They have 5 different sets of wish lists of things that we would like them to look at. I think it's up to them to come back to us in 2 weeks and give it their best shot as to however they want to proceed.
Madam Councilmember, Madam Mayor, I do advocate to you that direction, especially under these circumstances, is appropriate. If they're going to come back, I think they have a right to know what it is that we're looking for. And I mean, I think I've made my position fairly clear. I think Mr. Wasserman may want to further enlighten us. But I really, in fairness to the applicant, if they're going to, we're going to continue this, I really think we have to tell them what we expect when they come back. I'm expecting a 7-unit project with the access issue resolved.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Madam Mayor, in speaking to the motion, I think that what we're really talking about is a redesign. And if we're redesigning this, I don't see how we come back to the council on a continuance. I think it has to go back to the Planning Commission. It has to go to the staff and say, we're looking at the reduction in the number of units, and you know, I frankly, I do not see how we could continue to have a return to us if that's the degree of change that we're asking.
I think that only 2 people are asking for that, but I may be wrong. Mr. Wasserman?
I'm in favor of the 2-week timeout, and I think direction is very important. And the question I would ask of Councilmember Spector, through you, if I may,
okay,
is you're talking about going from 7 to 6. To me, when you're going from 7 to 6, you're addressing the issue of being too intense, too much density, if you will. If the setbacks already exceed what I normally think of as 5 foot and 5 foot, if they're already at 7.5, why are we asking for less intensity if they already exceed the space between homes of our requirements?
Mrs. Spector, do you want to throw your 2 cents in on that one?
This project is going to have one of 2 zones. It's either going to have an RM zone, and they're not even close to those requirements, or they're going to have a PD zone, which encourages exemplary design. And in my opinion, they don't have exemplary design also. So if you're asking what I'm looking for in my motion, I'm looking for them to take a timeout, as the mayor indicates, to consider this issue of their easement with their neighbor, but also to look at the design and how many units they're ultimately going to have, whether it's 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many they're going to have. But I don't consider this good design, and I specifically don't consider it good design to have the 2 homes, 1 and 2, with the backyards side by side.
You done? May I just reopen the public hearing for just a moment and have someone from the applicant come forward before we vote on this? I just want to make sure, I need a comment from you on whether or not you think you have direction as to what you might be thinking about or talking about in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I guess I'm hearing maybe 2 different directions from, I don't know if it's a majority or a minority. I hear 2 of you saying we're okay with the layout and the footprint, but we would like a resolution on the access. I hear 2 people saying we're not okay with the footprint, we're not okay with the density, and then I'm not sure where you stand.
Okay. I'm okay with the footprint and with the layout as it currently stands.
Okay, so if I hear you right, then our direction based on the majority would be that we take this next period of whatever, 2 weeks or whatever it is, that if we can iron out some sort of an access agreement and we came back, then potentially we would have the majority of the vote.
Potentially, everything's hypothetical since we never promise how we're going to vote.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
That I understand.
Okay, then I'll reclose the public portion. Are we ready to vote on the motion for continuance to 2 weeks?
I'm ready.
Mrs. Spector?
I'm glad we're all going to vote on my motion, and it looks as though it might pass, but I think that, for the record, mine was not simply a motion to continue. My motion also addressed the design, and if there are others of you on the council right now who don't agree with what I am saying, then I would suggest you not vote for my motion.
Okay, well then, I thought we had clarified that the comments that you made prior to your motion were separate from the motion. Mr. Glickman did ask about that, and I thought we had clarified that. So if you're saying that your motion is totally, I don't know what record we have, Mr. Korb, help us out here.
I don't have the motion written down, but taking Councilmember Spector at her word, I think she's articulating that her motion is to continue for redesign of the project, as opposed to a mere continuance. So that does cast a different light on the motion.
Okay, if that's her recollection of how it is, then that would be the motion. The motion is to continue for the purposes of redesign.
Now, I believe you seconded the motion. Is that the motion you understood that you were seconding?
No, it is not, so I will withdraw my second, and someone else can second it.
I'll second her motion, but I have a clarification for the attorney. If indeed this motion passes, there is a redesign that comes back to us in 2 weeks that, I'm just saying, reduces by 1 unit, okay? And that's the only thing that's changed. Number 1 disappears, let's say, and maybe we turn number 2 around a little bit or something. Would that not require, since it's substantive, would that not require a return to the Planning Commission?
If a proposed redesign is of a type that has the substance of which has not been considered by the Planning Commission, then council is obligated under its rules to remand the application to the Planning Commission for their comments. And if they don't comment within a particular period of time, then it automatically comes back to council. But yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can vote. So the motion is to continue it for 2 weeks for the purposes of redesign. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
No. Okay, motion carries. Another motion, please.
No. It fails.
Sorry, motion fails.
It's getting late.
We so usually carry everything, you know. Another motion.
I'll give
Mr. Westman, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll give this one a try. I'll make a motion to put this back 2 weeks to the next available agendized date per the mayor, bringing into considerations that Mr. Glickman and I have both raised as far as the neighbors, also bringing in the redesign issues. What I don't want to do is I don't want to waste 2 more weeks. Okay, I appreciate the fact it's gone 2.5 years. I appreciate the fact it's gone through 3 planning commissions and worked with the town architect and everything else. But you can tell from our 3-2 and going back and forth that we're not quite comfortable with this. Okay, Mr. Glickman opened up, and I'll get real close here. Please correct me if I'm wrong, saying this is pretty darn good. There hasn't been anything that's come out and said this is wonderful. Mr. Przinski said there's a reason this has been going on for a couple of years. Okay, you don't have a unanimous approval here because we're not totally satisfied with the design, with the this, with the that. So, Mr. Louie, my concern with you was when you came back up there looking at direction, you heard from 3 of us that we're okay with the footprint. I don't want you just to go back there, come back with the 7 homes, and count on the 3 votes that you heard, because Madam Mayor said, we're not promising how we're going to vote 2 weeks from now. Okay? For me, my motion is we re-agendize this as soon as possible through the mayor, and when you come back, you take into play everything you've heard here. You've heard people looking at 6 units. You've heard people looking at eliminating 1, turning 1 something. You need to put that thinking cap back on and come up with, I would suggest, a couple of options for consideration, so that you have a shot at a majority approval of those options. So that's what my motion would be, is giving that kind of direction to the applicant. Otherwise, it's a waste of 2 weeks.
Mr. Glickman?
Mr. Westman, I would very much like to second your motion. But I must say that if it came back, because I am sensitive to the issue of precedent and housing stock and giving people an impression of what we will and won't approve, I would not anticipate, and we would never say how we're going to vote, I would not anticipate approving a 6-unit design. However, I think that if Mr. Wasserman's direction is that, having heard some of the other concerns that were expressed, that any improvement that would make us lean more strongly towards a quick approval would be highly encouraged in that 2 weeks. If that's the motion, I second it.
Done.
Any additional discussion? Please no. Okay, let's have the vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, that one does carry 3-2, and we are now taking a 5-minute break.
Before
I'm
you
sorry.
walk, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, you do need a date certain, because you probably will be hearing some more from the players. You will be continuing the public hearing, so you need to continue the public hearing to a date certain.
October 2nd will work from a scheduling perspective.
Yes, it would. I really did mean 2 weeks. Okay.
Okay, so the motion that was made and approved was to continue the public hearing to a date certain, which is October 2nd.
Now may we have our break?
Yes, of
Oh,
course.
good. 5 minutes. And now we're under other business. I suggest we take care of those two consent items that were pulled. It was items number 8 and number 10. And I do have 2 cards on item number 8. So let's go ahead. Citizen Ray, you wanted to speak to item number 8? Well, you're closest to the microphone, and your card was first. You put your cards in first.
Yes, I wanted to raise the issue of the, well, first off, will you please read the item?
Oh, certainly. I'm sorry.
And we must stop the clock.
Item number 8 regards Highway 9 Safety Improvement Project, and number 10, when we get to it, are the minutes from the last meeting. Now your time starts.
Okay. Well, my concern with this item, you know, I've been speaking to the Highway 9 Safety regularly for years, seems like, okay? And now it's progressing along. But I see by the following: Los Gatos shall be the lead agency for the project for purposes of administrating the grant, preliminary engineering of the project, which shall include but not be limited to the preliminary study report, the project report, and compliance with NEPA. Los Gatos shall oversee the design and bidding of the project, shall award the contract for the project, and shall obtain all permits necessary for the project. Los Gatos shall enter into all contracts necessary to implement the project, provided the contract is approved by the parties. Los Gatos shall be responsible for overseeing construction of the project. Los Gatos shall provide oversight and inspection services for the project. And Los Gatos has the smallest interest in the project, you know, by a whole lot. So why is the engineering department of Los Gatos trying to take over the project, particularly when the designated manager of the project is a city manager of Monte Sereno? I can only think that somebody has got it figured out that this is a wonderful opportunity for the city engineer at $75 an hour to tap into the $2 million of public funding, okay? That can be the only reasonable reason for the city of Los Gatos engineering trying to run everything in face of the 2 councils of the other cities, understanding that Los Gatos would only be a party to the project, and Monte Sereno should run it. So I'm going to both city councils, Monte Sereno and Saratoga, and I'm going to give them a copy of this. And I'm going to let them know what a power grab it is, okay? A power grab, and why? Money. Money. I'd be interested in any comments to the contrary.
We also have another speaker on this item, and that's Joanne Peth. And while she's coming to the microphone, I'll ask staff, I'm assuming that the reason is what is explained on page 2 that says that Los Gatos is the only agency amongst, I like that word, the 3 municipalities to be approved for DBE projects that use federal funds. But can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that is the primary reason why Los Gatos was able to become the lead agency in the eyes of Caltrans, who provide this funding for us. They need, and the grant, the CMAQ grant, requires that there be a DBE agreement. We have one, Monte Sereno and Saratoga do not. So we became the lead agency. We have worked out this contract, the attorneys from all three of the jurisdictions and the engineers and the public works directors from all three of these agencies have worked out the agreement that's contained in the document that you have in front of you. It will be heard in Monte Sereno tomorrow night and heard in Saratoga on Wednesday night at their regular council meetings. Their council, their staff, not only, well, the staff participated in creating the agreement, their councils have the agreement.
So it will not come as a surprise to them?
It will be of no surprise. They've all been working on it. It's been something we have all made our entries into.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mrs. Peth, I just wanted to get that question out of the way. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm Joanne Peth and representing Highway 9 Safety Committee. And I know all three jurisdictions have been having meetings. I've been talking to Monte Sereno and Saratoga. I'll be at the Monte Sereno meeting tomorrow night, and I know we're waiting for your approval so we can move to that approval and then hopefully head on to Saratoga. So I appreciate all the hard work, and I know you've been collaborating on that. And I'm finally happy to see the projects moving forward, kind of been following it. As many of you already know, there have been many accidents already this summer on Highway 9. Most recently, a couple of power poles have been taken out, one just recently. 4 accidents that we know of involving bicyclists this summer alone, and there's more people than ever out there on Highway 9 using it for recreational purposes, so we need to get this going. This section of Highway 9 is a highly traveled gateway, which you all know, and it's a gateway to Los Gatos, Monte Sereno, and Saratoga. And, you know, if these improvements are done right, they can really serve as a model project of 3 cities and the county and all these jurisdictions coming together to create something that is a great benefit for all of our communities. So I'm really excited to see it going forward. And we at the committee appreciate your approval of this item so that the other jurisdictions can also vote for their approvals, and we can get this project moving along. So we support it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for hanging in for such a long time to have your say.
Thank you.
Mr. Glickman.
Okay, I will move to approve item 8. Wait for a second.
Second.
Okay. And as a comment, I want to both compliment and thank our staff, who certainly don't have an excess of free time, for undertaking the heavy responsibility of this safety-critical project. We all thank you.
Additional comments? Let's go ahead and have the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Spector, you wanted to talk about item number 10?
Yes, please. Since I anticipate from what I've read that this will be that the last call will be going to litigation, I'm going to be requesting that the minutes be amended starting on page 6. The first comment, second line, says commission did not err based on the evidence provided. I would ask that that be changed to the undisputed evidence provided. Then at the top of the next page, motion by Council Member Barbara Spector, change after that word Spector to finding that all provisions of the alcohol policy regarding hours of operation apply here, and that the Planning Commission decision to the contrary constituted a policy matter to be decided by the Council. And then it would go on and say, and upholding the Planning Commission's decision as it's currently written. And lastly, under where it says vote, motion passed unanimously, a note with the bullet there saying comments in opposition to prior motion incorporated in support of this motion. That's it.
Comments, anyone?
I certainly support the intent. My only question is to Councilman Spector, just to make sure that the changes you made are, and I certainly don't have it in front of me, consistent with what was in fact said. If they are, then I'll certainly support the motion.
The comments in opposition portion was consistent, and the undisputed was consistent. The alcohol policy portion was an issue raised by Mr. Korb before everyone took a vote on my motion.
Other questions, comments? No?
Should I move
Motion
to
to
Motion?
approve.
I have, is there a card for this item? Oh, for
Not for
12?
10. We're on
Oh,
10.
10.
I'm going to move to approve as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed, no, 5-0. Okay. Now we can go on to item number 12, which is adopting a resolution of the Town Council upholding a decision of the Planning Commission denying an application to operate a formula retail store, American Apparel, on property zoned C2 at 25 North Santa Cruz Avenue. Mr. Loritz, can you possibly find anything more to say about this? No. No staff report? Any questions of staff? We'll open it up for public. I have one card. Mr. Davis?
One card. What a change from just a few weeks ago, okay? Or months. I guess it's been months. But what I noticed was the resolution, the thrust of the resolution, the wording is changed dramatically from the last one that was put before you for your adoption, okay? The last one, in my memory, I thought was very specific, very germane, cogent, and it was what the Planning Commission, used as their guiding light in determining their position. And so here we are, 6 months later, after all the threats for litigation, and also the fact that the town went ahead and approved a men's clothing, which on its face indicated a level of application of the law on an unlevel playing field. It indicated that the town's position on the American Apparel was one thing, but when it came to the formula store of men's clothing, a totally different application, okay? So I think you've got a real problem if you pass this, okay? And I of course, I think it's appropriate you pass it if you feel that that's your position and always has been. Wonderful, okay? It's time to stand up and defend it. But I think what you should consider is releasing Mr. Korb from his contract to defend in court your position, because you'll probably end up in court. And I think you ought to get a man who does full-time litigation to defend the city on this matter, okay? Los Gatos is the only community that makes the city attorney do the dirty work in court if there's a challenge, okay? Saratoga, Montessorino always farm it out, okay? And I think you ought to relieve him, take out the potential conflict of interest, okay? And do the best job you can to defend your position, and to do that, hire a litigator, full-time litigator. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on item number 12? If not, council motion?
Move to adopt the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comment? Mr. Glickman?
Yes, I will be in opposition to the motion, as I was in opposition to the original decision. I won't reiterate all the discussion. It has gone on very long, and I think everyone understands everyone's position. I will simply comment at this point that I did not then and do not now agree with the decision to deny American Apparel. And since my reasons for that position are clearly within the record, I don't think it's necessary to reiterate them, but those will be the reasons why I will not be supporting the motion.
Any additional comment? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. We now move on to item number 13, policy discussion and direction regarding the transfer of parking credits in the downtown parking assessment district. And we're going to have a little staff report, and all we're looking for here tonight is overall direction, correct?
Correct. In 2002, Mr. McElroy received approval to rezone property at 227 Almendra Avenue from office to residential to construct a new single-family residence on the vacant parcel. As a result, the property no longer needs the 15 parking credits that are allocated to the property as part of the parking assessment district. Mr. McElroy retained ownership of these parking credits after selling the home and continues to pay the annual parking assessment, which will continue until 2011. Mr. McElroy has recently approached the town regarding 2 other parcels within the parking assessment district that he is considering converting from office to residential. If approved, there will be additional parking credits that are no longer needed for those properties. Mr. McElroy would like to sell these parking credits to other property owners in the district who may need additional parking to satisfy the town's parking requirements. For example, the owners of Cafe Rouge have indicated an interest in purchasing Mr. McElroy's unused parking credits. This matter is being brought to the council for consideration and direction, as Mayor McNutt mentioned. Staff does not see any significant policy concerns that prohibit council from directing that this matter be pursued. Amending the town code to allow the sale of unused parking credits would provide an additional means of obtaining necessary parking in cases where a property or business owner may seek to intensify the use of the property. The availability, extent, and procedure for obtaining additional parking through the sale of credits are all questions to be considered in the process of amending the town code. Staff recommends that this matter be pursued subject to these latter policy determination. That concludes staff's report.
Ms. Lords, what kind of staff work would you be doing if you get the direction from council to move ahead?
What we'd be doing is taking forward some concepts to the General Plan Committee and working with them as we evolve some language, text changes in the code. There'll be some, if there's some direction needed from council on some policy issues, then we'll seek that through the General Plan Committee's request.
And then from general plan, it would go to?
Planning Commission and then council.
And then council. So this won't be done by October 3rd or?
No.
Okay. Mrs. Spector?
Thank you. One question for Mr. Lortz. Since I'm one of the people who uses the term phantom parking spaces, I notice in Terry McElroy's letter, he says he dislikes that term because the parking spaces do exist. Do you know what he means?
He's just meaning that the parking credits result in parking spaces. And so the parking spaces in the district belong to him just like they belong to other people in the district. So he takes umbrage to the concept of phantom because they do, in fact, exist in the parking district.
In the district?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on item number 13? Okay, back to council. What's your pleasure? Vice Mayor Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, my pleasure is that we invite the staff to pursue this with the General Plan Committee as outlined.
Would there be a second?
Second.
Maybe a third?
Is this a motion or a direction?
Actually, I didn't see it as a motion. I just thought as moving towards some consensus. If that's adequate for the attorney?
Yes, this does not require a motion as long as there's a consensus for action to direct staff, and that would be sufficient.
I consent.
Okay. We have consensus? Yes, we do. Okay, staff? Okay, moving on to item number 14, introduced ordinance amending town code concerning informal bid procedures on public works, and introduce ordinance amending town code concerning formal bid procedures on public works.
I'll give the staff report on that. And very simply, both of the items included in this ordinance as proposed to council are essentially cleanup items to have the town code more closely track what is required under state law or allowed under state law with regard to the competitive bidding process. One of the changes would be to the town code provision that sets a ceiling of $75,000 on the informal bidding process, which is an exception to the formal and much more detailed competitive bidding process that we would otherwise be subjected to in public works projects. The reason that is recommended is because state law has changed to increase the ceiling for informal bidding to $100,000. If you were to ask public works staff whether there's any benefit to informal bidding, they would say yes, in terms of time and effort and efficiency in getting projects done. So to increase that limit means that there would be greater efficiency for projects up to $100,000. The other change that is proposed is proposed because the town code does not track the notice requirements of state law in a competitive bidding situation. State law requires that newspaper notice be published at least twice prior to the bidding, and our code says once, so it's inconsistent and needs to be changed. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak on item number 14? Seeing none, council, motion? You need a motion?
Absolutely need a motion to introduce the ordinance.
I will move to introduce the ordinance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Direct the clerk administrator to read the title and waive the reading. Need a motion on waiving the reading?
You can direct the clerk administrator to read the title first and then a motion to waive the reading thereafter.
Introduce the ordinance amending Town Code, Chapter 2, Article 5, Section 2.50.131 concerning informal bid procedures. And I think I should be reading the title. So let's try this again, sorry. Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending Division 2 of Article 5 of Chapter 2 of the Town of Los Gatos Code regarding competitive bidding for public works projects.
I'll move to waive the reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I would ask the mayor to instruct the clerk administrator, having introduced the ordinance, to publish a summary no less than 5 days prior to adoption.
So done.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are now up to council matters. Mr. Glickman.
So thank you very much. A request of the town manager. There was a meeting held with the staff of one of our local newspapers back in the late June timeframe. Council has not yet received a report on that. I think it was an important meeting, so I would ask that the town manager give us a report covering the genesis, what transpired, and the outcome and results.
Requires two.
Requires two. You're talking about this as a formal agendized item?
I'm requesting the report from the town manager.
But, okay. Is there anyone else who's interested in doing that? Receiving that information? No. So just a private conversation between the two of you, I guess, is what it was called for.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mrs. Spector.
Yes, I'm going to, hopefully, there will be somebody else on the council who will agree with my request. I think that over the past year we have had people appear before us with some very interesting, even exciting ideas about how we can take within the central business district and take some of the excitement that currently exists in that first block and move it north in terms of foot traffic, in terms of vehicle traffic, moving the vehicles further north into the parking lots down there, maybe working on the facades of the building, on the architecture of the building. Quite frankly, I don't know what it would entail, but what I would ask staff is to, again, if someone else agrees, is that staff could report back to us on what steps we could take to vitalize the north part of Santa Cruz Avenue as much as the further south part is.
I agree.
You agree that you would like it agendized or?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Or added to the work plan?
Yeah, added to the work plan?
I was thinking I would like it agendized, because added to the work plan, I don't know what that means.
Okay.
I agree with agendizing.
Mr. Korb, you had something you wanted to say?
Just to be clear, the agenda item would be to have staff report back on some ideas regarding how to approach the issue, because
Yes,
that would be the work plan issue.
It would be the ideas and then the process.
Mr. Brzezinski?
I'm just reminded that we completed the commercial design standards not too long ago. And a lot of that broke out the different districts, talked about some design issues that probably would be good for us to surface at the same time.
Mrs. Fagoni, did you have a question regarding this?
Not really a question. I would suggest that in council's agreeing to agendize this, that initially there be a conversation among the council about this idea to vet it out a little bit more, and then staff could have some guidance on how to focus our efforts as a result of that conversation.
So the first meeting or a public discussion item would be a discussion amongst council members regarding some ideas that staff would then take direction from, and then come back with a work plan.
I think that's a good idea, because this is a new idea for all of us except Mrs. Spector for this evening, and it's late and our brains aren't functioning, but I'm only speaking for myself.
And certainly in bringing that back, we can contribute to the conversation that evening, but then any subsequent staff work could be focused and targeted based on the ideas that are generated that evening.
Okay, so we have two people willing to put on the agenda, and I think probably concurrence from everyone else that at some point in the near future there will be an agenda item to talk about scoping this out. Yes? Okay, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I just wanted for clarification that the items Councilmember Spector brought up, and with reference to what Mr. Brzezinski said about the downtown guidelines that we have, I think that you expressed three different ideas that might be included or might be an enhancement. So when staff does bring this back for our consideration, if I'm hearing you correctly, that we look at perhaps some additional enhancements, changes, whatever, to the downtown area is what you're looking for, not just to bring back what already exists.
Some may be new, some may already exist. I mean, I can't sit here right now and figure it all out, but I know the concept, and which is to take this economic vitality and move it north on University or on Santa Cruz Avenue.
You want to talk about it?
I want to talk about it.
I'm with you.
And in that will be the assumption that it needs to be moved, which we'll have to talk about also. Anything else under council matters?
Well, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to, if I can, get a clarification or indication of comprehension from staff, that because I appreciate Councilwoman Spector's idea, and I think it's a good one to talk about. I'm just not entirely sure that the staff got very clear direction on what exactly it is that they're going to do and when and how they're going to do it. So if they could just help me be confident that they're clear on what we're asking them.
I think that the nature of the request is that council first have a more comprehensive discussion and give direction to staff out of that discussion. So staff is not going to be bringing anything back to council initially, but rather council will be having a discussion and directing staff, from which staff will then develop a work plan.
Okay, I would ask then, and I very much phrase this as ask of the town manager, to facilitate that discussion. I think any informed input would be much appreciated to assist us.
Absolutely. Oh, excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Absolutely. We can certainly tee the issue up and frame some questions that could help with the conversation without fully forming a program to respond to something that we haven't heard fully what your interest might be.
Okay, anything else under council matters? Mr. Wasserman.
Yes, ma'am. Now that our Monday night football game is over and our audience has returned, I'd like to reiterate the invitation earlier from the mayor bringing up about community unity, and that is to invite all those people that were involved in community unity in the last year or so to our celebration tomorrow at 7 o'clock at the Neighborhood Center, and also that any people interested in being a part of community unity and enhancing community service in our town, that they come to the Neighborhood Center at 7 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you. Manager matters.
None this evening, thank you.
We are adjourned.